Keeping up with Preem, let alone catching a live fox, was far beyond my pathetic physical limits. I don't know why I even bothered stepping off the patio. Well rested, wearing comfortable running shoes, beneath warm sunlight, with some form of rain-based reward at the finish line, then perhaps I could have finished a distant third in this foot race, albeit with much huffing and puffing and stopping to rest. Woken in the middle of the night, barefoot on freezing wet grass, surrounded by moonlit darkness and whipping cold, alone except for a demon rapidly outpacing me. I stood a snowball's chance in hell. I staggered to a halt a quarter of the way across the lawns, bent double with my hands on my knees. The sudden exertion had wrenched something loose inside my chest. Delicate muscles long bruised by brain math flared up into a terrible ache. I wheezed for breath, shaking all over, teeth chattering. Preem plunged ahead, sprinting after the scurrying fox. Legs pumping, long black skirt fluttering behind, loose hair caught by the wind. She was like a machine, each stride exactly the same as the last. No lungs to heave, no muscles to tire. How could any animal move faster? The fox slid across the ground, a blur in the moonlight. The chase headed for the lake at the rear of the estate, toward the dark halo of trees which surrounded the silver water. I clutched myself, shivering so hard I thought I might have a seizure. The chill had wormed its way inside me, soaked into my bones, turned my feet into blocks of ice. With a petite frame and low muscle mass, I'd always been susceptible to the cold. Ever since the strain of killing Alexander, I'd struggled even more to stay warm. Brain math had somehow leached a fraction of a degree from my body's core temperature. I straightened up a considerable effort and accepted I was not going to catch them. This was in Preem's hands now. I had to wake my friends, I had to get Raine out here, Evie had to figure out what was going on. That plan expired when I turned back to the house. Dark reptilian shapes and twitching insect shadows were detaching themselves from the same mansion, descending from the exterior walls or unfurling gossamer wings as they hurled themselves from the roof. Moonlit Pneuma-Somatic life spirits or servitors, I couldn't tell the difference, skittered and galloped across the lawns in a bedraggled wave of half-formed nightmares. I gaped at them and flinched as several passed me by. They raced after Preem and the fox. "What are you?" I stammered into the cold darkness. "Where are you all going?" A mantis-limbed monster brushed past me, low to the ground, so close I felt feelers trail across the back of my calves. I shuddered, gasped down a mouthful of lung-searing cold air. I doubted the Say family servitors were hurrying to assist us. "You!" I raised my voice, jabbing a finger toward the nearest spirit, a mass of rubbery gray tentacles attached to the back of a lean hyena-like quadruped. "Stop running! Stay!" To my immense gratification, the spirit stumbled over its own legs in haste to obey, or perhaps mere surprise. It tumbled over in a tangle of limbs and tentacles, sliding to a halt at my feet, before staggering up and backing away. A cluster of goat-like eyeballs on a stalk whirled between me and the chase. Trying to decide who to obey. Against the biting cold, I pulled myself up to my full height, not much, and fixed the spirit with the best glare I could muster, imitating Evelyn. I said stay, and I mean it, I snapped out as best I could, between chattering teeth and panting for breath. I turned on another passing spirit, at the tail end of the wave. "You! St-" A distant yip from the fleeing fox cut through the air, and confirmed my worst suspicions. The first spirit I'd halted relocated its courage and shot past me. "Hey!" I said. I huffed. "I said stay." "Oh damn it." Preem had run the fox right to the tree line before the lake. They vanished into the woods. I caught one last moonlit glimpse of Preem vaulting a bush, and then darkness. The wave of spirit life bundled in after them. Panic in my throat, I half turned back to the house. In the time I'd waste stumbling indoors and raising the alarm, the spirits would reach Preem. Would they try to hurt her? Would they even be able to touch her? Could she fight back? I could threaten them. Raine. I cupped my hands around my mouth and screeched at the top of my lungs, hoping my voice would penetrate both the thick walls of the mansion and Raine's sleepy head. Then I turned and ran after the doll demon. Struggling my way across the damp lawns, puffing and wheezing, plunging into the heavier shadows beneath the trees, I was keenly aware how insane this was. A few months ago, back at the start of the university term, a situation like this would have left me paralyzed. I'd have curled up in a ball, retreated beneath my bedsheets, praying for the monsters to go away. That Heather still lived in the back of my mind. She was screaming bloody murder, telling me to turn back so bigger, stronger, braver people could take over. I wasn't that person anymore, not really. I had things to protect besides my own fragility. I could, however, have made a better show of my resolve than blundering into the woods in the middle of the night. Visibility plummeted to almost nothing, moonlight dimmed by the tangled winter canopy. In seconds my feet were filthy, slick with mud, grazed by twigs and bits of stone. I skinned one elbow on a tree and scratched my forehead along a hanging branch, then skidded and almost toppled onto my backside. A pair of spirits whispered through the undergrowth and I stumbled after them, pajamas snagged on branches, ferns clutching at my ankles, cobwebs in my face and hair. An instinctive terror as old as biology gripped my heart, no magical explanation necessary. My brain stem shouted in the language of cortisol and adrenaline that I was a vulnerable little ape and the woods at night were not safe. This is a tiny copse of trees in rural England, I hissed to myself, the sound of my own voice staving off animalistic panic. You've visited infinitely worse places, Heather, you are probably one of the most dangerous people within 100 miles. You are fine. My words failed to convince my own evolutionary history. My hands shook and I broke out in cold sweat. My legs almost refused to move. I gasped with shaking relief when I finally burst through onto the far side of the trees. The ground sloped down toward the shining expanse of the lake, a stone's throw away. Relief crashed out and I scrambled to a stop. This time I did slip over, thumping my backside onto the wet grass. Servitors and spirits thronged the clearing. Dozens of them. Though so eager to answer the fox's cry, the spirit life was apparently too scared to rush the doll demon. They hung back in a rough circle, jerking forward in ones and twos before veering away again, scythe arms and sucker tentacles menacing but never connecting. The fox must have tried to hide in the undergrowth on the edge of the trees, giving Preem the opening to catch up. The animal or not animal had failed to account for Preem's inhumanly accurate senses. Through the crowd of Pneuma-Somatic life I caught the aftermath of her second or third unsuccessful lunge toward the fox. She dived and rolled, once immaculate uniform smeared with dirt. The fox slipped away inches from her fingertips. Yellow eyes flashing in the moonlight, it bounded away toward the lake. In that moment, I finally processed the meaning of what I'd seen the dew fox earlier. When Preem had it pinned, it had simply vanished from her arms and reappeared again at a distance, but I didn't believe it went outside. The trick had been instant, a click of the fingers. Foxes don't do math. Perhaps that gave me an angle to exploit. Preem! I yelled from bursting lungs as I picked myself off the ground. Behind there's servitors everywhere. Preem paid neither them nor I the slightest scrap of attention. She jackknifed it to her feet in one fluid motion and sprinted after the fox. Could she even see the spirits? They crammed after her in a shoving scrum, a wall of ectoplasmic flesh. One servitor shouldered through the mob and hurtled toward Preem on 4 galloping legs, a bizarre fusion of horse and lizard topped by a human-esque head without any eyes. It reared up behind her, to a full 8 towering feet. Perhaps I'd learnt the signs from so much time spent with Raine, the foreplay of real violence etched so indelibly on my sexuality. Or maybe year after year of exposure to spirits had taught my subconscious to read them better than I suspected. This one wasn't bluffing. The horse lizard servitor lashed out with a clawed hoof. I yanked my left sleeve back, exposed the clean black lines of the fractal on my forearm, and threw my arm into the air. Part. I yelled, shocking even myself. 8 in 10 of the spirits threw themselves aside, parted at my command. The rest were swept away by the others, knocked down or sent flying. I harbor no illusions of real authority. I'm neither big nor scary enough for that. I hadn't expected the command to work, but fear compacted my voice into a hard-edged shout. The magic of the fractal undoubtedly did most of the work. Blinking dumbly at my own success, shaking with cold and adrenaline, I barely took the opening before the spirits began staggering back to their feet. You! Stop! I shouted, still too far from Preem to make any difference. Success had robbed my voice of the unstudied steel, and this time nothing listened to me. Preem, behind Dash. My warning came too late. Preem wasn't listening, anyway. The spirit slammed into her from behind rather than passing through as it would a human being. The weight of Pneuma-Somatic flesh bore her down in a tangle of limbs. They rolled, horse legs, and made uniform and slicks of muddy lake bank and all. I scrambled to catch up. I think I was shouting something inane, get off her, leave her alone, probably a threat to send it outside. Silly me. None of that mattered. When they rolled to a stop, Preem was on top. Completely unshaken, except for her hair now in terrible disarray. She jerked a fist back with machine piston speed, and slammed it into the spirit's face. It made the most terrible sound. Half screech, half pulverized jelly under a pneumatic press. My eyes went wide, bile clutched at my throat, and I had to turn away as Preem wound up a second punch. Hoofs flailed at her head, buffeting her side to side, but she didn't even blink. I didn't stay to watch. The other servitors lost their nerve also, scattering before the doll demon's sudden violence. I stumbled after the fox. Amid the confusion, the animal had reached the water's edge and turned to stare, decided I was less of a threat than Preem. No need to run from out-of-breath Heather, confused and slow, a mere human being lost in the dark. Stop running, I panted. Stop running, I have to either we catch you here, or we'll have to get rid of you. Just stop. The fox began to slink away. Despite the impossibility, I lunged for it. A worse than useless gesture. All I managed to achieve was to lose my footing. I slid and slipped, feet going out from under me, bumped both my backside and head on the thankfully sodden ground, and squealed as I slid bum first into the icy cold lake. Luckily the edge of the water was less than a foot deep. I splashed down, gasping in the cold, pajamas soaked and muddy, freezing my unmentionables off. I think I swore, rather loudly too. Second time falling over in one night, chasing a magical fox. Some holiday. The fox stopped less than 4 feet away and turned to stare down at me. Most animals cannot laugh, but I swear it looked amused. Was I really so little of a threat? A slapstick joke. Slowly, deliberately, never looking away from those yellow eyes, I placed one hand against the slick earth of the lake's edge. Got you, I said through chattering teeth. Got you now. The fox tilted its head. Only seconds to pull off this trick. The fox would flee as soon as Preem stood up again. She was still busy beating the spirit to death, the sound of pounding jelly reverberating through the air. I can think faster than you can run. I hoped against hope it understood English. And I can teleport everything within 12 feet outside. You, me, the mud, the water. Outside. Outside, you understand what that means? It did. Oh, that fox understood me loud and clear. I saw comprehension in the blink of its eyes, in the single raised paw, the sudden tensing of muscles. Then I can teleport myself back, I hurried, shaking all over in the freezing water as I climbed to my knees, hands still pressed to the muddy bank. And I'll leave you there. I will do it, to protect my friend. If you're what I think you are. I will. I was bluffing, but the knot fox didn't know that. Myself I could certainly zap outside. The fox, yes, if I could touch it. But a sphere 12 feet across, ground and all. I'd give myself a brain aneurysm. The fox suddenly craned its neck to where Preem still straddled the beaten spirit. "Excuse me, I'm talking to you," I said. The fox jerked back to me, ears swiveling. "You don't believe me? All right, I'll demonstrate." I'd executed more complex hyperdimensional mathematics under far more stress, and paradoxically the lack of preparation cushioned my mind again the white-hot searing pain a little. I slipped the equations into place, winced so hard my vision blurred, and shoved the levers of reality just enough before my nose began to bleed. Beneath my hand, a football-sized chunk of mud and grass vanished outside. Water slopped into the sudden gap on the bank. The fox stared, eyes wide and alert. I bent forward to empty my stomach into the lake. Preem slammed into the animal with a diving tackle while I was busy being sick. The gambit had worked, given the fox just enough pause for Preem to creep closer. She landed in the water with a huge splash and came up with the fox pinned lengthways, both of them dripping with greenish lake mud and soaked through to the bone. The fox tried to snap at her wrists but she pulled it taut from forepaws to back legs, drawing a horrible pained yelp from the animal's snout. It went very still. "No. No escaping, no," I spluttered as I pulled myself upright and thrust a hand toward the animal. My head pounded, I couldn't feel my fingers or toes, but I had to make this credible or it would just teleport out of Preem's grip again. "I'll do it, I swear, I will." The fox moved again. It whined and writhed, foaming at the mouth. Yellow eyes rolled to fixate on my hovering hand. It twisted to bite. I flinched, and yellow teeth snapped shut on empty air. Preem shook it. "Stop, stop, Preem, stop," I said. "Just stop." "Oh, God." The doll demon looked up from the fox. I could barely make out her expression in the moonlight, but her milk-white eyes were clear enough. "Victory," she intoned, voice carrying across the dying ripples on the lake. "Yes." I heaved a huge breath, teeth still chattering, and wiped my mouth on the back of my arm. Even the vomit was cold. "Victory. Right. What do we do now?" Preem looked down at the fox, then back at me, then down at the fox again. "Removal." "No. No, Preem, we don't know what it is, not really, we don't. We have to dash." I went to push my hair out of my face, but managed only to smear more cold mud on myself. "Ugh, tch. We need to get back to the house." "You don't even feel the cold, do you?" I glanced past the trees, to the looming bulk of the mansion in the middle distance. The spirits had mostly fled, but a few lingered to watch from a safe distance. "Why did you all try to help it?" I yelled at them, but no answers were forthcoming. "Why?" "Removal," Preem repeated in her clear bell-like voice. I shook my head, rapidly going numb, and sniffed back a slow nosebleed. "Removal. No." I whirled back to Preem, my toes sinking into the disgusting mud. Preem's maid uniform was ruined, skirt bedraggled, the frilly crosspieces limp, top twisted sideways, smeared with mud and lake silt. It helped us, back in the house, remember?" The fox led Raine and I to where Evelyn was brooding on her own. "We don't know what it is. We have to take it back, oh, damn." I focused on the fox, caught in a decision I didn't want to make. The animal was panting hard, twitching and flexing to search for the tiniest bit of slack in Preem's grip. "There's no way to tell. No way to tell. Removal. We can't just make the decision on our own." I squeezed my eyes shut, shivering all over. My head was killing me and I felt like being sick again. "We have to show it to Evie." Preem didn't answer. Only the fox's panting and the slow slap of water broke the silence of the night. "She was so happy," I hissed. "Evie was so happy. I can't bring this to her." "I can." I bit my bottom lip and nodded. "We both will." I can't kill that fox and pretend this didn't happen. I can't lie to spare her feelings. Or I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world. It's not my mother. I tore my eyes from the caged fox. My teeth started chattering again. You're certain? How can you be certain? Evelyn sighed and shook her head. Puffy-eyed from sleep, she hunched in the spindly old chair like a hibernating toad, blanket draped over her shoulders. A single animal brain is too small, not complex enough to contain the human soul, mind, whatever you want to call it. It would just, she opened her fist and made a dismissive squelching sound with her mouth. But you said, by her grave, you said, about worms? Didn't you? Heather, Raine purred, encouraging my drooping hand back toward my mouth. More drinking. I nodded, took Raine's advice, and took another sip from the third steaming mug of hot chocolate she'd pressed into my hands. My fingers burned with that unique sensation, skin warmed too quickly after exposure to the cold as did my nose, toes, cheeks, and the back of my neck, all reddened and chapped. My skin stung all over, buffeted by the warm air pouring from a portable space heater. Where Raine had found that I had no idea, but she'd wheeled it into the echoing magical project room and parked me firmly before it, brooking no complaints. The fox or not fox watched us from inside a makeshift cage, constructed in a hurry from parts of an old chicken coop subjected to the tender mercies of Raine's quick thinking, lashed together with duct tape and garden twine. The prison sat atop one of the tables, swept clear of assorted junk. An equally hasty magic circle surrounded the table, drawn onto the floorboards with marker pen and crayon. After Preem and I had blundered back into the house, raising the alarm, I'd barely been able to stammer out an explanation. Between the shivering and the adrenaline, the vice of cold gripping my body, and my muddy dripping clothes, stringing together any words at all was challenge enough. Faced with Raine's confusion and worry, I found it nearly impossible to express the truth of my suspicions. My absence had woken Raine before my shouting. My tone had prompted her to grab the handgun from her bag. My state covered in mud, frozen to the bone, out of breath, next to Preem clutching a semi-catatonic fox had left her momentarily speechless. Such a rarity. Not one I relished. I'd nodded and shuddered with relief when Raine had grinned, called me a brilliant mad bastard, and leapt straight into practical problem-solving mode. Vindication quickly turned to guilt. Stupid Heather, what did I expect? How would I react, had the roles been reversed? Raine had one priority above all others, but she controlled herself and took charge, as Evie stomped down the stairs to glare and frown, as I repeated my threat to the fox and impressed on my friends that we couldn't dry off or warm up until we had it contained. Preem and I had stood side by side in the cathedral-like space of the project room, surrounded by the half-cleared magical detritus of Evelyn's mother's long-ago halted work. I was filthy and shaking, despite the towel Raine had wrapped around my quivering frame. We held the fox physically and metaphysically as Raine and Evelyn built cages of matter and magic. As soon as the animal was properly incarcerated, Raine's attention had turned to me. Not a word of admonishment passed her lips. Not a frown, not a single tut. That wasn't her way. She did all but manhandle me to a bathroom, despite my protests that we needed to stay and see what happened, that Evie needed our help, we couldn't leave her alone with that thing. Raine had laughed, more amazed than amused, shaking her head. I hadn't understood, shivering and frowning. She gently shushed me and I was too cold to resist. She stripped off my sopping wet clothes and got to dunking me in a lukewarm bath as quickly as possible. My skin began to tingle and my toes started to ache, and only then did I realize how terribly worried she must be. Warm water, not hot. Warming you up too fast is a mite dangerous, she'd said. Don't you dare touch that tap, Heather. You sit, right there, and I'll be back in a jiffy. Stay right there. Wave some soap around if you like, but no rush. Raine, I'm sorry, I dash. Whoa, hey. Raine raised her hands and half shook her head. No apologies in order, not that I know of. Should there be? I've made you worry. I'm sorry, I dash. That made her laugh again. I boggled at her, confused, racked by guilt and wilting in the overlarge bathtub, my head still pounding from brain math. Muddy runoff had stained the water brown. Heather. Heather, words don't do it justice. You don't even realize how brave you are. I'm proud. She shrugged. Hell, what am I gonna do, tell you off? I'd have done the same. Probably swam after the thing on my own and nutted it one in the skull. Let's get you warmed up, hey. She'd been grinning, but she'd also run upstairs and back in quite a hurry. She returned with fresh clothes, hers, a size too big but none more comforting in all the world, and a large fluffy blanket liberated from some forgotten bedroom. It smelled of dust, but at least it was clean. We really do need to go help Evie, I'd complained. We will, sure. 100%. Lower your head, love, close your eyes. She'd showered the mud off me, hand in my hair, then rinsed the nosebleed from my face, cleaned the cuts on my forehead and elbow and feet, drained the bath and filled it all over again, until the water finally ran clear. Raine, if the fox is, we can't leave her to deal with it alone. I tried to stand up and blunder out of the room, half-dressed and woozy. Raine had smiled and sat me down on the floor, hands on my shoulders. Evie's got Preem. Preem's a lucky girl, she doesn't get frostbite. Sit for a moment, yeah. Frostbite? I squinted at her. Please, Heather. For me. She personally inspected my feet before slipping socks over them, pinching my toes to test for sensation and wrapping my cuts in antiseptic gauze. I sighed it off at the time, impatient and worried, but later on I realized I'd run a very real risk of bacterial infection. That lake was filthy, and I'd been wading around with open wounds. Preem had fared both better and worse than I. Her skin was, after all, a type of illusion, tactile Pneuma-Somatic flesh wrapped around a wooden core. Immune to frostbite, untouched by the cold, easily repaired with wood glue. She didn't even have goosebumps. The mud and water was a different story. She stood off to one side of the echoing project room in a bedraggled mess, wrapped in a mantle of old towels entirely for our modesty, not hers. I don't think she cared about being naked. Her blonde hair hung in dirty rat tails, splashes of mud on her face and hands. Her wonderfully bizarre-made uniform was ruined, dumped in a corner. Evie. Evie, Preem's still filthy, I blurted out when Raine had led me back into the room. Aren't you going to dash? Later, Evelyn grunted. She was scrawling in a notepad, staring back at the fox. It sat on its haunches, watching. She can wait. I watched Preem, trying to catch her eye. She stared straight ahead, expressionless, hands folded as if nothing had happened. Preem. I tried. What about your maid uniform? We can clean it. Preem turned her head to stare at the sad pile of clothes. Preem. Necessary sacrifice, she intoned. Raine was trying to get me sat down in a chair, but secondhand outrage brewed strong and wild in my chest. I wasn't going to let Preem linger filthy and cold when we just had each other's backs out there in the confused midnight melee. The only thing she'd ever shown personal interest in had been ruined, she'd thrown it away to protect her mistress, to protect Evelyn, and now it sat in a sad sodden heap. Can't you go wash yourself? Evie, can't she at least wash herself? I'd asked. Preem swiveled her head to stare at me. Order her to. Evie. What? What are you on about? Evelyn's head jerked up from her work. Wash myself, Preem echoed. Evelyn waved Preem away with a huff. Yes, off with you, whatever you want. Preem traipsed out, towels and all. I finally allowed Raine to maneuver me into a chair and tuck the fluffy blanket around my shoulders. Is it safe now? I'd mumbled. Evelyn grunted, waved me quiet. I drifted, nodding with exhaustion, adrenaline finally wearing off. Evelyn added twisting symbols to the exterior of the magic circle. Raine returned again to rouse me with hot chocolate and heat. Brain math, after effects and mild hypothermia fed on each other. My head was killing me, a tight ache as a counterpoint to the dull throbbing around my diaphragm. I sipped hot chocolate when told, drowsed heavy and slow, though I woke a little when Evelyn's father blundered around outside the room. Evelyn stomped out there, stern-voiced, told him nothing was happening, go back to bed. Perhaps he was used to that kind of treatment. Ignore your wife and daughter doing strange things at odd hours, if you wish to retain your sanity. I made a fuzzy mental note to apologize to him personally in the morning. We needed to clean up all the mud we tracked in, somehow I got fixated on that, drifting on the edge of sleep. But Raine was 2 steps ahead of me, ushering Evelyn back into the project room and apologizing to Lewis. No need to worry about this mess, all our fault, we'll clean it up first thing in the morning. Promise. Don't want to make more work for your housekeeper, after all, do we? Always so smooth, my Raine, always with the right thing to say. A third mug of hot chocolate, fuzzy blanket tighter around my shoulders. Raine stroked my hair, rubbed the back of my neck. I roused myself from the edge of sleep as Evelyn slumped into a chair nearby and slapped her notebook down on the floor. That she'd announced her verdict. I finished that sip of hot chocolate and repeated myself. Evie, you said about how worms could eye in dead flesh, an dash. We'd know if the worms had gotten to my mother, she snapped. Because they'd be walking. I looked down and focused on another sip of hot chocolate. Evelyn sighed and made a wide gesture with both hands, trying to indulge me but lost for words. I could only imagine her turmoil right now. Also because we'd all be dead, right? Raine added with a grin. Right, Evelyn grumbled. She nodded toward the fox. It stared back at us, very unlike a caged animal. Unblinking, still except the occasional twitch of an ear. If that was her, you'd be dead. Or worse. I don't know. It's not her. Then what is it? I asked gently. Evelyn shrugged. I shook my head, confused. You mean you can't find out? Short of vivisecting it, no. Bottom line for me, is it dangerous? Raine asked. She stroked my hair one last time and took several steps toward the caged fox. The animal regarded her with quick yellow eyes. She leaned forward and bared her teeth at it in a mock growl. Oh yes, absolutely lethal, a deadly mortal foe, Evelyn said. If you're a rabbit. I blinked at her. Raine snorted and shook her head, then made a rapid tongue-clicking noise at the fox. That made it react more like a fox, tilting its head and swiveling those big ears. Evie, I struggled. What? It's a fox. It teleported. It understood your name. I'm pretty certain it understood English too. Half the spirit life in Sussex ran to defend it. How can it be just a fox? Yeah, look at it now, hey. Raine added. She moved to watch the stoic animal from different angles, and the fox tracked her as she circled the cage. I'm not exactly Ray Mears, but I'm gonna bet this isn't normal fox behavior right here. Shouldn't it be having a bit of a panic? Evelyn sighed and spread her hands. It's not a fragment of my mother, and it's not anything else. The very first thing I did was have Preem see if it's one of her kind, a simple demon riding an animal body, a spy, I don't know. But it's not that either. It's not an illusion, it's not an outsider, it's just a fox. But why your M-dash? Heather, we are not the center of the world. Not everything we encounter is about us. Teleporting magic fox, then, Raine said. Sure, great. Why not? Evelyn glowered at everything and nothing. Could Lozzie have sent it? I asked, mouth dry, headache making me wince. Evelyn shot me a withering look, and despite myself I shrank down before her glare, wishing I could vanish inside my blanket. Suddenly I felt small and stupid. Perhaps I'd caused all this ruckus for nothing, gotten wrapped up in a fantasy of protecting my friend, dug up her past and pulled Preem along with me. Heather Morel, a bad influence on impressionable young minds. Who'd have ever thought? Raine gave up inspecting the fox, with a final mock growl at the caged animal. Perhaps she'd noticed the emotions I tried so hard to keep from my face, because she crossed back to behind my chair and reached down, firm hands slowly rubbing my shoulders. Feeling awkward, I almost tried to move away. It did help us, I added in a hesitant voice. That first night here. It led us to you. Evelyn nodded and pulled a resigned smile. I don't think it's any threat. It can't even escape that circle, and that's not exactly my best work. If it wanted to hurt me, or take over my brain, it would done so when I was, she cleared her throat. Feeling worse. Good. Poor little bugger. Raine cracked a grin. You must have given it the fright of its life. Heather, master of the hunt. I sighed. Oh, don't call me that, I know. Evelyn glanced at me sidelong. You overreacted. A terrible little wretched voice whispered in my chest. I'd made trouble for my friends, caused a huge mess, assumed everything was about us. Jumping at shadows. I couldn't concentrate past the headache and the pain, the echoes of cold in my bones, the sense I'd gotten this wrong, but I tried to pull myself up and look Evelyn in the eye. What was I supposed to think? I can't tell what's dangerous and what isn't anymore. Frankly, since I met you two, erring on the side of caution appears to be a requirement for merely staying alive. I lost my train of thought. Hadn't realized how strongly I felt that. Evelyn started laughing. Slowly at first, a suppressed chuckle, then a full-body laugh which made her put one hand over her eyes, that usually so sour mouth curling into a real smile. She laughed quietly in her chair, panted for a breath, leaning forward in a vain effort to control herself. Evie. I stared at her. Whoa, Raine whispered. Oh, do shut up, Evelyn barked over her own mirth. She forced down a deep breath and shook her head, carefully controlling her smile until it faded to an amused echo. I am capable of seeing the humor in all this, you know. I'm not made of stone. She's never had a proper laughing fit, Raine said to me. Saw first. It is most certainly not a first. You don't see everything I do in private, Raine. Raine shrugged in theatrical defeat. Evelyn cleared her throat. A requirement for staying alive, she echoed me. Quite right, Heather. You overreacted was not critique. You're learning, at last. It's my fault too, I filled your head with horrors, and you acted on them, because you have a good heart. She cleared her throat again, and I think I even detected a tiny blush in her cheeks. She shrugged. Damn straight, Raine added. Preem did all the hard work, I said, shrinking inside my blanket again, but for the opposite reason from before. She actually caught the fox, I just threatened it. She has no independent initiative, Evelyn said. She wouldn't have gone running off into the night without you putting the idea in her head. She doesn't have ideas in her head. I don't know about that, I distracted myself with a long sip of hot chocolate. Now was probably not the time for this conversation. I do, Evelyn grunted. I glanced over to the ruined maid uniform, a sad sodden pile in the corner, and chewed on my bottom lip. She did rock that look, Raine said, following my gaze. Especially the tits. Raine. I rolled my eyes. Yes, she did, but I was thinking more about how much she enjoyed it. Yeah. Pity, I was gonna get you to try it on as well. Me? I squinted up at Raine, almost choking on a mouthful of hot chocolate. What on earth was she thinking? I could never pull off that look. For a start I was far too scrawny, not to mention inelegant, not only would I barely fill out the uniform, I'd be mortified. I blushed and stammered. Raine, don't be absurd. You'd be dangerously cute. She shot me a wink. Despite the cold, I squirmed inside, and not in a bad way. Evelyn rolled her eyes, let out a big sigh. Don't make me get the garden hose. And for the record, Preem cannot enjoy anything. Evie. I rounded on Evelyn, half at Preem's defense, half to avoid my own squirming embarrassment. Is it possible you could be wrong? I still believe she was making this her identity. She liked it. It's the only thing she's shown any organic interest in. Evelyn huffed, exasperated but still trying to indulge me. She can't have interests. She went after the fox because I thought it was threat to you, I said quietly, but my words stopped Evelyn cold. She did it for you. The least we could do is clean the uniform for her. Or get her a new one, somehow. Please, Evie. She is good eye candy, Raine muttered. Evelyn grumbled low in her throat. That lake is filthy. It's been stagnant for years, probably more rat piss than water. God alone knows what bacteria are breeding in there. She looked at the pile of crumpled clothes. Those are a biohazard. We should burn them. I folded my hands around my empty mug and waited. Evelyn frowned into her lap, then risked a glance at me. She averted her eyes and shrugged heavily. I suppose my father could, she muttered quietly. He knows some proper tailors, in London. I could, you know. Evie, I murmured. Thank you. I'm sure Preem will thank you as well. She bloody well better not, Evelyn snapped. The little side door into the project room opened, admitting the whisper of soft feet against the waxed floorboards. Raine craned around to look first. Speak of the devil. She lit up in a crooked grin. Here he, what? What? Raine burst out laughing. Evelyn stared, open-mouthed with disbelief. I smiled in delighted surprise. Preem rejoined us. Freshly showered, I assumed, as her skin shone and her blonde hair hung clean but badly in need of brushing. She strode back into the room with precise but oddly gentle footsteps, deftly avoiding every hint of the muddy footprints from earlier. Not surprising. She had good reason to take care. She'd found another maid uniform. It wasn't identical to the first outfit. The skirt was an inch or two longer, with a hem of folded lace and a high waist showing off the flare of her hips, while the sleeves ended in tight cuffs around her forearms. No shoes to go with this one, unfortunately, but she had located some very high denier count black tights to warm her feet and legs. I rarely wore tights, but in that moment I felt the ghost of envy. They looked rather comfortable. What? What? How Evelyn spluttered. Raine couldn't stop laughing. I lit up inside and out. Oh Preem, oh, that's wonderful. Good on you. I clapped my hands together, excited despite myself. Preem marched over to her customary spot, diagonally behind Evelyn. She resumed her usual pose, hands folded before her, staring straight ahead. I put a hand to my mouth, almost giggling. Where the hell are you finding these? Evelyn demanded, outraged. Maybe she's making them. Raine supplied. Answer. Evelyn clicked her fingers. Preem turned her head to stare at her mistress, blank white eyes betraying no emotion. Around, she intoned. Evelyn huffed and shook her head. Sod the tailor then. Evie, please, try to be happy for her, I said. She likes it. She's trying to be human, I'm pretty certain of that. Succeeding, Preem intoned. At being fabulous. We all stared at her, I with a giggle on my lips, Raine and Evelyn both amazed. Well, sometimes you can't solve every mystery, Raine said eventually. Where does Preem get her fetish gear? Is this animal actually just a fox? As long as nobody's attacking either of you, I'm good. I'm great. 2 thumbs way up. You would be, Evelyn grumbled, glaring at Preem. She turned back to me. We'll release the fox in the garden tomorrow, if it hasn't teleported itself away before then. You need to get some sleep, Heather. You've got an ordeal ahead of you tomorrow, unless we want to spend all week in this house. Ah, right you are, Raine said, and squeezed my shoulders again. What? I blinked. I have. Evelyn's eyes inched downward, toward the floor, and what lay beneath. We've got to go back down into the cellar, deeper this time, and I'd like to get it done before any of us lose our nerve. Hey, Raine said, mock offended. Yes, we all know you'd crawl across broken glass for a pretty face, Evelyn said, and cut Raine's joking retort off with a raised finger. The map, Heather. That's where my mother kept it. Her life's work. Oh, yes. That is why we came. I swallowed. Comprehending the map is not a gentle experience, Evelyn said. And I have no idea what it'll do to you in particular, but if we want to stand any hope at all against your eye, you need a way to navigate the outside, rather than random teleporting. It'll be fine, Raine murmured, one hand soft against my forehead. I'll make it fine. I nodded, a sober chill running down my spine. Yes, of course. To get to Wonderland. Evelyn shrugged. Time we all got some more sleep, if you two can keep your hands off each other for 5 minutes. Hands off, Preem intoned. Contrary to Evelyn's dire warning, confronting the map was only the second most terrifying challenge I had to face that following day. Before you hit call, let's hash out a plan, yeah, said Raine from next to me on the bed. She even raised a hand to stall me, as if I'd located my courage somewhere between my quivering pile of nerves and my inability to grip the mobile phone straight. A plan, I managed. My mouth felt so very dry. Raine snorted with poorly concealed laughter. I attempted to glare a hole in her head. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, it's just so cute. She reached out and squeezed my shoulder. Heather, it's gonna be fine. What if it isn't? Then I'm right here. Always. To her credit, Raine killed the smirk at last. I forced out a shaky breath and gestured limply with the phone. It's all right for you, I said. You don't have to make the call. I hate making normal phone calls, let alone dramatic ones. I totally can, if you want. Raine held out a hand for the phone, and I knew this was no rhetorical gesture. She'd do it if I asked. Hell, it was my idea. I'll rip the plaster off, you can do the aftercare. We'll 1-2 punch M. We can show off how we make a great team, as well. Raine, I don't want my parents' first impression of you to be a voice on the phone asking, guess who's banging your daughter. Raine lost her composure and started laughing again. I won't say that. I won't. Cross my heart and hope to die. Best behavior. Your face tells me otherwise. Her offer was extraordinarily tempting. I really didn't want to do this, however much sense it made. My guts churned and my chest felt like a vice, my heart fluttering in my ribcage like a dove trying to escape. If I delayed much longer, I was going to get lightheaded. Let Raine shield me from reality, from unpleasant tasks, from life itself. No, she was here to help, but I had to do this myself, I couldn't avoid it forever. I still wasn't all recovered from last night, a little wobbly and unsteady, drained inside, even after several hours wrapped up warm in bed with Raine as a hot water bottle. She'd helped change the dressings on my feet this morning, but they still ached from all the little cuts and scratches. I'd eaten too much breakfast, great big slabs of toast and jam and a helping of scrambled eggs, but now the food sat like lead in my stomach. I stared at my phone's contact list, trying to decide between my parents' landline number or my mother's mobile. Slim choice. According to our original rough itinerary, my parents were expecting us at their leafy suburban house in Reading tomorrow morning. They expected myself and 2 friends, for a little stay in the few days leading up to Christmas. I doubt they were prepared for their only daughter to stage a full-blown closet evacuation. Nor could anybody prepare for Raine. I could just about picture myself stammering out to my mother that I was a lesbian, and yes, it's not a phase, and fielding the inevitable invasive questions and idiotic assumptions, but deep down inside I was terrified of what they'd think of Raine. If either of them said anything like that to Raine's face, I don't know what I'd do. I hated confrontation. I might be able to kill an evil wizard with my mind, but a shouting match with my parents? Absolutely not. I think Raine figured that out before I did. That's why she suggested the phone call. After breakfast that morning, Evelyn had said she wanted to try a further magical experiment on the caged fox. A boring experiment, to hear her tell, which would involve a lot of reciting Latin at the poor animal, and drawing several more magic circles, in an effort to tease out whatever supernatural shard had embedded itself in the fox's brain. I'd been all ready to go with her, as a peanut gallery or to sit quietly, but Raine had declared quite firmly that she and I had a matter to attend to. Ah yes, I see, starved for each other's attention, Evelyn had drawled. Don't let me get in the way of a good shag. Evie. Raine had burst out laughing. I wish, but no dice. We gotta call Heather's mum. The bottom had dropped out of my stomach. We have. I think we better. Give her a bit of advance warning. Only fair. Ah. Good luck. Shout if you need help, I suppose. Evelyn shrugged. She took Preem with her instead, all prim and proper in her new uniform, after assuring Louis we'd all still be here when he and his lady friend returned from London that evening. So that's how I ended up cross-legged on the bed, cradled by residual warmth, rubbing my feet through thick socks to ease away the little pains. Raine had sat me down, rubbed my back as she explained her rationale. It would be easier on them and me if I told my parents now, give them a day to process or let us read the signs that we shouldn't turn up at all. Better to avoid the cliched soap opera moments. Parcel things out in bite-sized chunks. Fair warning. None of that helped the crippling anxiety. Then you gotta have a plan, Raine was saying. She leaned against the bed's headboard, one foot rubbing my shin. Do you want to hit them with the big shock first, a rapid attack, and then flank them up with some softer stuff so they can't overfocus? Or go in nice and slow, lead them on with a couple of gentler strikes before you drop the hammer? I squinted at her. Raine, this isn't a battle. What on earth are you trying to say? What's going to shock them more, that you're gay and have a girlfriend, or that you've moved out of your old bedsit? I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. What's the worst-case scenario? Raine, please don't. I don't need that on my mind. You absolutely do, so we can defeat it, she said. She wasn't joking. She'd finally wiped away even the shadow of an amused smirk, replaced by sober concentration. She met my eyes and I couldn't look away from that all-knowing certainty, that confidence burning like a bonfire. What's the worst-case scenario? Try to put it into words. As clumsy as you like. They could shout at me. Tell me not to go visit them. They wouldn't though. And no, wait, the worst thing would be if they treat it like it's not real, not legitimate, something you've pressured me into, a thing girls do at university, something like that. Gay, till graduation. Right. I could hear the eye roll in Raine's tone. Exactly. That would hurt. Normally Raine would take a cue like that to pull me into a hug, tell me it's all going to be okay, play the bold angel on my shoulder. Instead she fell silent, looked up at the ceiling, nodding slowly. Raine. That would be the worst, yeah. Thinking about whether I should tell you a little story or not. Last thing I want to do is put the wind up you, but she shrugged with lazy theatricality. I sighed at her. You could not be more obvious with your bait if you tried. Go ahead, say what you have to say. Who says I'm not trying? Raine shot me a slow, knowing smile, but then she pressed her lips together and brought it under control. Her tongue lingered at the corner of her lips. I never had to come out to my parents. I was way too obvious. I blinked at her in surprise. Raine never talked about her family. She waited a beat, watching me, and I thought she wasn't going to continue. You're rather obvious these days, as well, I said, hoping it would prompt her. She nodded and laughed softly. Yeah, just the way you like it, huh? I won't deny that part. Raine looked up at the ceiling again. I think my mum and dad like to pretend I'd grow out of it, but I can't be sure. Never mentioned it, never brought it up. Never got the bird and the bee speech either, any of that. TCH, I tooted. That's so irresponsible. Par for the course round where I grew up. By the time I ran away from home, maybe a third of the girls in my school class had gotten themselves knocked up. Like 13, 14 years old. Place was a shithole. Probably still is. She shrugged. Anyway, I'm drifting. Point is, my parents didn't know even half of what I was up to. What they did notice, they pretended not to. Things you were up to. My imagination raced, filled in the details of Raine as a young teenager. She saw the look on my face and laughed, reached over and goosed my knee. Are you serious? She shrugged and half shook her head. All teenage crap, but it feels different at that age, you know. Though I did fight a dog when I was 12, that really happened. Long story. I did make out with girls at school a few times, and I got in a scrape twice over other girls. I had this whole love-hate thing going on with one of the preppy crowd. She was trying to hide it from her friends. Super repressed, I was trying to help, you know, my Robin Hood act. Doing it even back then. Raine. I wasn't sure if I should be impressed or not. Goodness, I'm glad I didn't know you. I would have found you terrifying. She laughed again, almost self-conscious. Stupid drama, you know. Nothing serious, nothing permanent. Until my parents caught me necking with a girl, and everything blew up. In my own bedroom, mind, not in public. She was half naked, I was, you know. Not the sort of thing they could pretend not to see. That was about a week before I ran away from home. That was why you left. She nodded. My dad said some things nobody should ever say to their own kid. Oh, Raine. For once it was my turn to lurch into a clumsy, reassuring hug. Ah, it's fine, I'm fine. She laughed and rubbed my back. I broke his nose for it. I pulled back, staring at her. You what? I broke his nose. Not exactly my proudest fight. Had to use a chair. You broke your own father's nose. With a chair. At 14 years old. Yeah. She cracked a grin. Hey, I gotta have some talent in life other than making you happy. I sat back and nodded, still processing these scraps of my lover's history. You deserve so much better than that. Got it now, haven't I? She winked at me. I sighed and felt myself deflate a little again. Flattery will get you everywhere. How much of that story was told in aid of taking my mind off calling my parents? Some, she admitted. Point being, there's no way your parents are gonna react worse than mine did. If your mum gets ugly, you can put the phone down. Just put it down. Block her for a couple of days, give them time to think it over. You're not a teenage girl trapped in her bedroom with her dad about to hit her. You've got us, and you're free. I sniffed back the edge of a threatening tear or two. Okay. Thank you, Raine. I waved the phone vaguely, trying to control the tremor in my hand. Stay here, okay? Please don't wander off while I do this. Wouldn't dream of it. Here I go then. I selected my mother's mobile phone number, took a deep breath in a vain effort to control my racing heart, and pressed the call button. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Heather dear, is that you?" My mother's voice, higher pitched than my own, a little pinched with age and stress, practiced and smooth from almost 2 decades of a customer-facing job. "Yes, of course, hi Mum." I glanced sideways at Raine, received 2 thumbs up and a big grin of encouragement. My pulse throbbed in my throat, so hard I was certain my mother would be able to hear it down the phone line. "And how are you, little miss, gallivanting around the countryside?" my mother asked. "Are you having a nice time with these friends you still haven't told us about?" Truth be told, my mother and I didn't look that much alike. Samantha Morell was bigger boned and a little heavy set, especially around the waist, where her twin daughters were slight and petite. My and Maisie's phenotype had apparently jumped a generation from my grandmother. I could picture her perfectly from her voice, the practical and serious expression on her face, the slight frown of curious attention, the hint of ironic disapproval behind her words. "Yes, why yes, we've been having a really nice time. My friend, she's got this really big house in the countryside. It's nice here." On top of the messy lie, my words sounded lame and limp. I felt myself shriveling already. "Well, you should send your father and I some pictures, shouldn't you? You do have a camera on that phone, and you almost never use the thing. Sometimes it's as if you're on the moon, dear, rather than at university." I let out a little sigh, trying to rally. "Yes. Sorry, Mum. Look, I have something I need to tell you about. It's important." A moment of silence, then, "Yes." One word, and I set off shaking again. My mother's tone was all too familiar, the same detached waiting she'd always used when I was struggling to deal with a particularly gruesome hallucination, when I was on the verge of expressing the horror out loud, whenever my mental illness threatened to issue forth into the real world. Raine was right, I should have planned. I needed a script, a set of correct pronouncements. "Mum, I swallowed. I almost pulled the phone away from my ear and handed to it Raine. Almost. My arm twitched. "Damn it, Heather, you've faced otherworldly monsters and alien gods. You've saved friends from hell dimensions and outthought evil wizards. You're friends with magicians and werewolves and your lover is a murderer. Damn it. Mum, I'm gay. As in, a lesbian. I thought you should know." Halting and hesitant, but once it was said I felt such a weight lift inside me, head throbbing with adrenaline, light with release. I let out a slow, shuddering breath. For a long moment my mother didn't say anything. I began to tense up again, braced for the worst. "Don't be stupid, Heather, of course I know you're a homosexual." I blinked, at nothing, then over at Raine. She was close enough to hear my mother's voice from the phone grinning like a maniac. She mouthed, "Homosexual," in real or feigned outrage, I couldn't tell which. I shook my head, struggling to concentrate on what I'd heard. But, Mum, why you dash? Parents know things about their children, dear." My mother actually tooted. "Of course we know. The signs aren't exactly subtle, if one is merely a little attentive." "What, signs?" I showed signs. "Of course you did. All sorts of things down the years. Don't you remember that one trip to the hospital, when you were, about 12, I think, and you really liked that one nurse? You kept saying you hoped she would come back, you wanted dash." "Mom." I flushed beet red. "Oh my God, that's so embarrassing, stop." Raine was laughing so hard she had to roll her face into the pillow to contain the noise. She kicked her legs against the bed. "Or the sorts of posters you used to put on your bedroom walls," my mother went on. "Never boy bands or strapping young men, absolutely not, no boy crazy years for you. Really, you think your own mother wouldn't notice these things? I deserve a little more of your faith, I think. You must get this from you father, he's likely to be a little confused by all this too," but read my lips, "It's obvious." Oh okay, give me a moment. I didn't expect. I took a deep breath, and a vindictive part of me reared up inside. Mom, also, I've moved out of the flat you and Dad picked at the start of term. I've moved in with a friend, and my girlfriend. This time I felt my mother's frown before she spoke, 100 miles away. Heather, she snapped, and I flinched. I can't believe you moved out without telling us. What were you thinking? Who are these people you're living with, the same friends you're with now? Yes. Yes, Mum, it's fine, it dash. You know how you get, you can't let peer pressure dictate your behavior. Mum, I dash. Of all the irresponsible things. Heather, I thought we had a handle on this. She huffed, tight and exasperated. Between your medication and the dash. I'm not taking my medication anymore, I blurted out, before I had time to think. Heather. Oh dear. I sat there on the bed, head pounding, at a sudden loss. I almost flinched again when Raine took my shoulder. She nodded once, gently. I swallowed and opened my mouth, and let the words flow. I know you don't like it when I talk about being mentally ill, but Mom, listen, I don't see things anymore. At all. Not a single hallucination, 4 months now. No more lost time. No more nightmares. Technically every word of that was true. I'd never hallucinated in the first place. There was no need to tell her the truth of what I saw every day, or that a magical symbol inked on my forearm held the nightmares at bay. I'm healthier than I've been since before I lost Maisie, before the eye. Since I was little. I'm well, for the first time ever, and I owe part of that to taking steps for myself. I know, but I felt a little steel enter my voice. Mum, I'm never going back to the hospital. Not Signet. I don't need to, and I won't. We'll see about that. From my mother, that was as good as surrender. So, don't keep me waiting, what's her name? I blinked. I'm sorry, whose name? In the corner of my eye I saw Raine light up with a cheeky, knowing grin. She kept far better track of this conversation than I could. You used the word girlfriend very distinctly, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't notice, and you're not one to make up things to brag about. So. This girlfriend of yours, my mother said. What's her name? How long have you been going out? How did you meet? Is it serious? Very, very serious. Raine radiated smugness. She cracked a cheesy open-mouthed smile and pointed both index fingers at herself. I went to swat at her but she wriggled clear and hopped off the bed. And what's her name? Her name's Raine. Raine Haynes. Raine struck a pose, hands on hips, chin inclined. Well, your father and I are going to have to meet her, aren't we? Don't you have any pictures of her? You can keep us informed about things like this, you don't have to hide them. We get very nervous when you hide things, you know that. I don't have any. She's right here though, I can dash. Oh. Put her on the phone then, I want to talk to her. My throat closed up and I thought my eyes were going to pop out of my head. I covered the mouthpiece and stared at Raine with mounting panic. She wants to speak with you. What do we do? Raine stuck her hand out. Wow her with my sheer charisma. Raine. Don't you dare use any innuendo. Please. Raine feigned with her right hand, then swiped the phone from me with her left, dancing back beyond my reach. Raine drew her spine up straight, composed her expression, and put the phone to her ear. Mrs. Morell. Good morning. I'm Raine, and first I must apologize for any unintentional eavesdropping on my part. Oh, no, that's quite all right. Let me say though, even if we're not face to face, it's a delight to meet you. For one mind-bending moment I thought Raine had been replaced with a doppelganger, so artificial was her good girl voice. Then I heard the tinny sound of my mother asking a question and Raine flashed a huge grin at me, wiggling her eyebrows. "Yes," Raine replied, voice still imitating a bright-faced innocent maiden. "Yes, more than anything. I am taking very, very good care of her, I promise." Burning with embarrassment, I buried my face in the bed and crammed the sheets over my ears. Raine was talking to my mother. 90% of what Raine and I did together was absolutely not for parental consumption. Even the non-adults only stuff. I'd rarely felt so awkward, desperate to drown out the one-sided conversation. After a minute or two of agony, Raine gently tapped me on the shoulder and waggled the phone at me. "I'm to leave the room," Raine said with a controlled smile. "Your mother wants to talk to you alone." I accepted the phone and Raine went to the door, then turned back and mouthed, "I think she likes me." I waved her away, still flushed in the face. "Mum. A sweet young lady, very well spoken. We will still have to meet her, Heather. I'm not entirely comfortable with you doing this sort of thing on your own." "Mother, I'm an adult," I hissed, surprised at myself. I'd never spoken to my parents like that in the past. "I can make friends and lovers by myself, thank you." Has she left the room?" I glanced up. Raine waved at me from just beyond the doorway. "Yes. She knows my mother lowered her voice, as if the neighbors might overhear. "About your issues, yes. Yes, she knows all about my history of mental illness. She doesn't care about that. She's helped." Raine beamed at me. Well. You and her are dropping by tomorrow morning, yes? And my other friend too. She's called Evelyn, we're very close." "Oh yes. Making friends." My mother sighed. "Heather, I know I'm an old worrywart, but I do like that you've spread your wings a little. You've grown. You never used to play well with others as a child, you were always on your own. You seemed so happy, until all the unpleasantness." I wilted inside, lost for words in the moment. This minor victory, this understanding from my mother, passed beneath the shadow of a far greater dislocation. I'd never been alone as a child. Me and Maisie, always together. I bit my tongue. It didn't matter how accepting my parents were. They remembered the wrong history. "I have a theory," Evelyn said. "Oh. It's your theory really?" "I'm sorry, a theory about what?" "About Fantastic Mr. Fox, what else?" Evelyn looked resigned, that same slow acceptance she sometimes displayed when her guard was down. She adjusted her feet and her weight on her walking stick, and returned to peering down the cellar stairs. We stood side by side in the dusty sitting room at the far end of the mothballed east wing, the concealed cellar door wide open before us, weak illumination creeping up the wooden stairs from below. Raine had insisted we remain up here while she checked on the doors we'd have to pass on our way to the map, and Evelyn had sent Preem along with her. The work of a few minutes, apparently, so Evelyn and I waited, kicking our heels and feeling surplus to requirements. "My theory?" I said, terribly awkward at bringing this up again. "My theory was that it was your mother. Contamination, pollutant buildup, all that stuff." Evelyn waved a hand. "I still can't tell what that fox is, only what it isn't, and that got me thinking. With the tools I have I can find Pneuma-Somatic life, demon possession, translocated minds, stray outsiders, all the stupid brute stuff of magecraft. Whatever's in the fox is too subtle, below my notice, not in the old books. Not worth the time and attention of a power-hungry magician to study and record, because it's not useful." She shot me a glance and cleared her throat. "My mother isn't the only Say family mage buried in that graveyard." "You mean it might be somebody else? A piece of some ancestor, or perhaps all of them, accreted over time." "My mother, the things I found in her notes, about failsafes against death, those were intentional. She wanted to be immortal, she wanted to come back. The fox, it's hardly brimming with power. And I'd like to think not all my ancestors were monsters. Perhaps the spirits around here think so too. Whatever's in the fox probably doesn't even know it was human once. Like a gut parasite. A disgusting metaphor, I said with a bit of a forced laugh. I'm quite sure they weren't all monsters. They produced you, after all. Evelyn smiled ruefully. She shrugged. Have you set it free yet? I asked. The fox? No. Evelyn frowned, hesitated. I'm trying to decide on killing it or not. Oh, that's your call, I suppose. I'd rather not. Can't be certain. Maybe it's best not to anger the ghosts of your ancestors. I suggested, half serious. No such thing as ghosts, Evelyn grumbled. I relented. I could barely imagine the difficulty of the decision, but I wanted to be here if she needed a sounding board. Preem did seem quite intent on killing the fox last night, I said. Evelyn regarded me with a pinched frown, and a sudden sinking feeling tugged at the base of my stomach. Oh. Oh, you don't think she knows more than she's letting dash? Absolutely not, Evelyn snapped. I can compel truth out of her, understand? She doesn't know what it is either. She said she wanted to kill it. God damn it, the last thing I want is a trigger-happy demon. Where's she picking this up from? From Dash, I swallowed. From you? Evelyn huffed and waved me off. Maybe. Evie, what if Dash? I took a deep breath and tried to put all the pieces together in my mind. I had them all to hand, but expressing this in the face of Evelyn's ire was not easy. I think Preem's just being protective, of you. Evelyn's expression fell into unimpressed gloom. Heather, how many times do I have to repeat it? She can't care. What possible motivation would she have? She did hear everything you told me, Evie. Evelyn frowned at me. When you told me all about your mother, at the graveside yesterday, I said. Preem was standing there behind us the whole time. She can overhear conversations, yes. And then down there, I nodded at the open cellar door. She heard every word from you. Everything you told me. Is it so implausible she might have felt the same way I did? Jumped to the same worried conclusions about the fox? Evelyn frowned tighter as I spoke. She can't feel, Heather. They don't think like that. Anne, I tried my best to forge on through Evelyn's scorn. She has us for role models. What? Role models? Whatever monsters your mother made, they only had her as an example. The demon, the one she put in you, the impression it had of human beings was entrapment, hate, torture. I'm no expert, that's your area, but Preem's had us. You, me, Raine. She met Twill, she helped us save Lozzie. We're not so bad. Evelyn stared at me for a long moment, frowning hard. I assumed I'd lost her again, though I believed every word I'd said. Eventually she grumbled low in her throat and shrugged. Maybe. I'm not surprised she might want to protect you. You brought her here. To her, maybe you're sort of a surrogate. Evelyn frowned like thunder and I cut off the final word of my sentence, put my hands up in surrender. Sorry, that's a little distasteful, yes. Bloody right it is. She tooted. Hello. Raine called from below, voice echoing up the cellar stairs. You two still up there? We are. I called back in relief. Dead zombie storage is clear and locked, she called. Come on down. Dead zombie storage. I raised an eyebrow at Evelyn. Semi-literal, she grunted. The cellar vaults extended much further beneath the same mansion than was entirely sensible. Preem took a vanguard position and Raine held my hand, a heavy-duty lantern torch in her other. We quickly left the main cellar room behind, with the stacks of metal kegs and pretension toward modern concrete. Raine had to duck as we passed underneath the open stonework archway at the back of the room. Our cluster of footfalls echoed off the centuries of stone, vanishing into the subterranean darkness of the T-shaped hallway beyond. Dank air seeped into my clothes, but this time I was prepared for the journey. 3 t-shirts, 2 of which were Raine's, my pink hoodie, and a pair of very comfortable gloves Evelyn had lent me. I'd tucked my hair down the back of my hoodie too. Every little helped. I still shivered, but not because of the cold. We clattered down the short stone corridor. Half a dozen heavy wooden doors led off on either side, all shut tight. Then we crossed what seemed like a much older storeroom filled with the rotten stubs of ancient barrels and some shattered pieces of furniture. The only modern object was a huge cork pinboard mounted on a stand, covered with the corners and scraps of once extensive notes and anatomical diagrams. Bulbs struggled along the ceiling on metal brackets hammered into gaps in the stonework, half of them dead and the other half too weak to matter. This certainly is appropriately creepy. I'll give it that much, I muttered. It's fine, Evelyn said, at full volume, the depths returning her voice as a dozen twisted echoes. Everything down here is dead or deactivated. We're almost there. Preem, she called a few paces ahead. Don't touch anything. No touching, the doll demon confirmed. The door loomed up out of the shadows. The door, capital D. Oh, you have to be kidding me. I let out a long-suffering sigh. That is absurd. It does look kinda overkill, Raine admitted. The door which barred our way to the map was straight out of a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, or one of those role-playing video games Raine is so fond of. Hewn from a slab of oak, banded with black iron, sealed with a trio of huge stainless steel padlocks, it looked ready to withstand a battering ram. A magic circle ringed the door frame, spilling onto the stone floor, cut directly into the surface with a chisel or acid. Whatever was in there was not getting out, and nobody unwelcome was getting in. I hate magic, I muttered under my breath. So do I, Evelyn grunted, and set to work. Unlocking the door was quite a performance. 30 seconds to remove the padlocks, the clunk of their mechanisms echoing in the stone confines, followed by a long drawn-out 2 minutes as Evelyn traced her fingers over precise points of the magic circle, muttering Latin and worse beneath her breath. Some of the words hurt my ears, made me wince. I felt my heart in my throat, and took a steady, calming breath. Eventually Evelyn stepped back and spat a gob of bloody saliva into the corner. Evie? Raine asked. You okay? It's nothing, she grunted. It's unlocked now. You first, she nodded at Preem. The doll demon grasped the door's iron handle and shoved it open. Raine raised the lantern, squeezed my hand, and we shuffled inside. I'd expected an actual map, perhaps something pinned up on the wall. Or a huge scrawled mural, a magical design so complex and so insane it would make me quiver inside with disgust and recognition in equal parts. Instead, the underground chamber contained a kind of secret study. A small, neat desk sat against the back wall, a pair of thick modern notebooks stacked before an uncomfortable chair. Evelyn flicked at a light switch and a few sad little bulbs guttered on above us, chasing the shadows into the cracks between the stones. One low table contained some magical detritus, a half-finished circle on some canvas, stubs of chalk, a sheaf of notes. A second low table played host to a box. A tall, rather intricate box, standing on its end. Dark lacquered wood, decorated with floral gold leaf. Tiny brass hinges crowned the top and split the design at regular intervals down the length. A puzzle box, closed and locked. Right, the trick is not to look at it in your peripheral vision, Evelyn said as she crossed toward the box. Either keep it in full view, head on, or don't look at it at all. If you have to look away, it's easier to close your eyes first. Is that it? I glanced from her to the puzzle box. This? No, this is some old Chinese tourist trap nonsense my grandmother picked up in Shanghai. Simple good fortune, it's about the right size to hide the map from an accidental glance. She tapped the black wood with the head of her walking stick, then met my eyes. I'll open it up whenever you're ready. Wait, I need to, I'm just going to go ahead and look at it. I swallowed, throat dry, and glanced between Evelyn and Raine for help. Preem stood prim and proper by the doorway, no help at all. What should I expect? I'm feeling a little intimidated here. Saw sculpture, basically, Raine supplied. She let go of my hand and unfolded a pair of extra-large plastic food bags from her back pocket. I stared at the bags. I didn't even have to ask the question. Right. Sick bags. Great. Just in case. Raine made a pained smile. She slipped her arm around my waist, for support. Oh okay. I tried to take another deep breath, but my lungs quivered. Heather, Raine said my name softly. I've seen it before. It's tough, it might mess with your head, but I wouldn't let you do this if I thought it was genuinely dangerous. But if you two have seen it already, I said, struggling to resist the urge to back out, to panic. What am I meant to dash? I don't know exactly what effect it will have on you, I admit, Evelyn said. But from what I know about how the map works, and your self-implementing hyperdimensional mathematics, I think you're going to understand this in a way I never could. In a way my mother never could. An outsider made this thing, with my hands, but with outside logic. You have those principles living in your head. Read the map, Heather. See if you can. This time I managed to suck down that deep breath, nodding slowly. I leaned back into Raine's arm. I reminded myself why I was doing this, the reason I was even here, Maisie. Go ahead, open the box. Evelyn nodded, and grasped one of the hidden seams on the puzzle box. I've stared at this thing enough in the past. I'm going to look away, alright? I'm going to stare into the sun right along with Heather, Raine announced. Nothing to it. Do it, I said. Before I lose my nerve again. Evelyn opened the box. Folded down the dark wood. Let it splay itself like a flower. Inside was the most intricate and most delicate sculpture in all the world. Metal, perhaps stainless steel, shining and bright, but could any steel be wrought as thin as spider silk? 3 feet tall, 1.5 feet wide, it contained 100 million feet of space, folded and folded and folded again. Spars and bridges of metal connected tiny perfect spheres, razor-edged cubes, fluted columns, in such fragile miniature, all embedded in a base of more metal flowing outward like a slug's foot. My eyes roved across the structure almost as if I couldn't control my hunger for more detail. Thousands of those little spheres and cubes, 100,000 spiderwebs linking them. Rough metal joints, scratches, pieces bent out of shape, none of it could mar the perfection of the whole. For 5 or 6 seconds, I merely stared, amazed at the detail and beauty of the object. Then I began to feel queasy. Beautiful, yes, but deeply unnatural. Angles of metal vanished in on themselves. Spans of silk, delicate steel threaded behind spheres and cubes, seemingly connected to nothing. Spirals of spheres and cubes ascended or descended, yet formed perfect loops. A million optical illusions all at once. I felt Raine tense up next to me with the same gut-sick reaction. To run one's eyes across the shining bridges of metal, to consider the sheer number of little spheres, try to count them or to trace a route from one spot to the next was to invite a head-spinning nausea. Cold sweat broke out on my face. I don't dash, I said, as I tilted my head to look from a different angle. And I saw what I was really looking at. How could one possibly describe the majesty of a sunset to a person who's never seen the sky? This sculpture, made by a tortured captive demon, held a layer of meaning that only I and perhaps Lozzie, and somewhere out there my twin sister had the contextual framework to comprehend. Oh, it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. My eyes ran faster along the metal, tracing routes with increasing speed, tripping and skipping ahead as my mind completed the leaps before the structure expressed them. There was the fractal, a part of the map, and wasn't that funny? A piece of the structure of reality was inked on my arm, keeping the eye at bay. And there was Wonderland, represented by one of those little spheres. How small, how unimportant, compared to the whole. Raine tried to hold me back as I leaned forward, stumbled toward this shining truth, but I barely felt her grip. I saw the ways between the spheres, and it was so obvious. How had I not realized this before? How had I not figured out the maths by myself? All reality lay here, at the tip of my brain, for the taking. All I had to do was reach out. I slipped along, faster and faster. I was panting, cold sweat soaking my clothes, hands shaking uncontrollably, and I didn't care. I could find Lozzie with this. I could go anywhere. If I could just memorize every single link, run my eyes down every single filament of wire, the mathematical perfection would complete me, in some fashion I'd never known I was lacking. Who needed friends, or help? Who needed to live, or be human? With this in my brain, I wouldn't even need my twin back, I'd be. It wasn't Raine's hands or Evelyn's panicked voice which ripped me back. It was that thought I wouldn't need Maisie. That was stupid. I wasn't a person without Maisie. I was half a person. I reeled away from the map, spluttering and gagging, and for a fraction of a second I saw the sculpture in my peripheral vision. The shining metal expanded, building more of itself in the blink of an eye, unfolding to fill all space, all time, until it crowded around the edge of my vision and filled all the world with a cacophony of endless complexity, except for a tiny tunnel left to my fragile human perception. Black and dripping on the utmost rim of reality, the insight a red-hot bolt of pure pain in the center of my head. That was the real map of outside. I ripped my eyes away from it. Raine caught me, held me up as I scrabbled for one of the plastic food bags in her hands. I got it in front of my mouth and doubled up and squeezed every muscle tight and screwed my eyes shut. I think I made a keening noise through my teeth. I'm not sure, and I certainly don't recall what Raine and Evelyn were saying, because for once, for the first time ever, I held on. I shook and my stomach muscles clenched up, but I held on. I didn't vomit. I refused to let that feeling master me, that illusion of true comprehension I'd felt, the seductive temptation of understanding it all, of mapping outside. Such arrogance. To try was to burn out my senses. I'd grasped enough. Heather. Heather. Hey, come on, deep breaths, try to stand up straight. You're okay, you're completely okay. I got it, I did, I gasped, eyes closed as I made absolutely sure I was not facing that infernal sculpture. I saw it. I saw it. Saw what? What did you see? Evelyn snapped. Let's get out of here first, yeah. Raine said. I felt her hands, strong and firm, on my back and around my waist. It worked. Evelyn snapped. Raine, wait. It worked. Sight. Gave me sight, I muttered, nodding. Sight? To where? Of what? Evie, come on, let her dash. Outside. To anywhere, I panted, and knew with sickening certainty I held that map in my brain now. The byways and secret passages of the castle we all lived in. To Wonderland. I've been told, repeatedly, that I must possess a rather high tolerance for pain. This is not true. I really do think Preem is too big for this, I said, then shot a guilty look at the doll demon. Sorry, I didn't mean any offense by that. Preem turned her head to stare at me, but if she was capable of interpreting my words as a comment on her plush physique, she didn't say anything. What did an immaterial creature from outside care about body weight? I assumed pain also meant nothing to her. No, the approaching pain was going to be all mine. A lump in my throat, a tremor in my chest, a churning in my gut, my body knew what to expect. I twisted my hands together inside the warm gloves borrowed from Evelyn, watching the soft white leather bunch and crease. Strange, how the mind can magnify attention on such tiny details, when one is trapped in on the precipice of panicked anticipation. She's no larger than me, Evelyn said with a shrug. Cept up front, Raine muttered. She smirked, but even Raine couldn't quite conceal the worry behind her expression. I saw it plain in the tightness around her eyes, the way she jiggled one knee up and down, her tight grip on the edge of the table. If I shied away now, Raine would support me all the way. She'd let me put this off for another day, 3 days, a week, a month. She'd let me, but that wasn't what I needed. I did love her for trying, but even lewd comments about Preem's chest couldn't take the edge off my nerves right now. Yes, Evie, but bringing you and I back from outside took I forced myself to swallow. Quite a toll on me, if you remember. What if I can't, on the other side, what if I can't dash? That's why you're going to take Preem, Evelyn said, calm but blunt. I remember what it felt like, yes, like being run over by a bus. Preem won't feel that. If you're incapacitated, we don't want you to be alone. She shared a glance with Raine, who nodded and pulled a reassuring smile for me. Couldn't have put it better myself, Raine said, then added, to Preem, you best look after her if she needs to sit down and get her breath, right? Promise, Preem intoned. Get my breath? Oh damn it all to hell. I huffed and stripped the gloves off, shoved them in my coat pocket, and unzipped the coat down the front, desperate for fresh air as I unwound the scarf from around my neck. I felt trussed up like a small child about to venture outdoors to play in the snow. I'm burning up in all these layers, this isn't necessary. Not entirely true. Nerves and stress raised the heat under my collar, not ambient temperature. We had the ancient iron radiators cranked up to full, but Evelyn still wore a big heavy jumper and nursed a steaming mug of tea at her fingertips. Even Raine wore 2 t-shirts, one long-sleeved, to banish the dense January cold gripping Sherrowford. Freezing wind, scudding clouds, barely a scrap of sun all week. I wasn't used to this, soft southern girl I was. Sometimes it really is grim up north. We myself, Evelyn, and Raine were gathered in the X-drawing room, Evelyn's magical workshop. Not exactly the warmest place in the house with its broken radiator and clutter and half-working lights. We all itched to get back upstairs or at least into the kitchen, but if everything went to plan none of us would have to sit here for long. Yes, the plan. I wished I'd never committed to it. I longed instead to resume the anime marathon Evelyn and I had finally begun 2 days ago, ensconced in front of the television, watching her bootleg DVDs of Symphogear, all brightly colored transformation sequences and plucky teenage girls punching monsters. Most uplifting. Or perhaps I could get back to working through the new term's reading material, Frankenstein's monster and Wuthering Heights, prepping for next week's lectures. Who was I kidding? Right now I'd settle for curling up in bed with Raine, shutting out the world for skinship and affection. Instead I stood in the middle of a mage's atelier, with a sheet of painstakingly transcribed hyperdimensional mathematics to hand, shaking in my cheap trainers. Preem didn't care about the cold. She did what she was ordered to do, and right now she'd been ordered to accompany me outside. Heather, hey. Raine left her spot by the table and gently took my frantic hands in hers. You said it was cold there, right? What I said was, I thought it might be chilly. I also went there in a dream, does that mean I should wear pajamas? I bundled the coat down my shoulders. Raine relented and helped me. I'm only going to be there for a couple of minutes. I don't need this. All the same, just in case, yeah. Raine smiled that maddening smile, the one she kept in reserve purely to make me feel better. She handed my coat off to Preem, and the doll demon folded it over her own arm without question. I can do this alone, I said in a quiet voice. It'll be easier that way. The less I have to teleport, the less strain on my mind. We know that by now, you know I'm afraid of passing out. Of choking on my own vomit, I meant. Raine smiled again, indulgent but unyielding. She shook her head. You gotta take Preem with you. Simple choice, It's her or me. It's not as if you could stop me, I snapped, and instantly regretted my words. Oh, sure, you're right about that, Raine purred. A dangerously playful tease reared up in her tone. I quivered at that sound that certainly took my mind off the coming ordeal. Our Raine, now isn't Raine. Raine leaned in close and put a hand against the wall, boxing me in from above. Sometimes I forgot how tall she was compared to me. I might not be able to stop you, sure, but when you get back, I'll have a punishment waiting for you, for being a little brat and putting yourself in danger. My breath stuck in my throat. If this had been any other moment, if Evelyn had not been sitting 10 feet away rolling her eyes out of their sockets, I probably would have replied with a squeak and said something deeply embarrassing. Yes please, Raine, please punish me for being bad. She let me go, backed up with a smirk and both hands raised. Right you are, boss. In charge it is. Good. Good. I had to take a deep breath. Won't be when you get back through. I tried to play that off by rolling my eyes, but I felt more than a little flushed in the face. How much of that ultra-aggressive flirting was solely to take my mind off all this? I didn't care. It helped, a lot. I thanked Raine silently, but I'd thank her properly later. When I got back. If you two have quite finished your mating ritual, Evelyn drawled, are we doing this today or not? Just let me think for a moment. All right? Squeezing my eyes shut and focusing inward wouldn't help at all. I had no more thinking to do, only procrastinating, so instead I paced over to the heavily curtained window, with my arms folded across my chest, where I could peek out into the damp Sunday morning in the street beyond. A few distant spirits roved across the Sherrowford rooftops, going about their ineffable business. Onward, to the end of the room, to the wreckage of the cult's doorway portal mandala, and then back to the table, where my neatly printed sheet of deadly notepaper lay safely contained beneath a heavy book. Putting it off isn't going to make it any easier, Evelyn grumbled. Let her think, Raine said. Evelyn's right, I whispered, and moved the book aside. The sheet of notepaper lay face down, another thin barrier between me and the clarity I'd spent 3 days inscribing in cheap biro. Putting this off is pointless. I know that. I'm just terrified. One could be forgiven for thinking hyperdimensional mathematics had become routine for me, that it shouldn't scare me anymore. Hadn't I mastered it? Used my ill-gotten powers to defend myself, to resolve crises, to kill an evil wizard? I could threaten spirits and monsters from outside, I could deflect a bullet, I could commit murder. This power was mine now. What nonsense. The scraps I could wield without frying my own brain were the deceptive shallows of a black sea of infinity. Evelyn's cosmic map had reminded me how small I was. My fingertips brushed the notepaper, warm to the touch, like fevered flesh. This equation or set of equations, a conch shell of hell math, recontextualized by the map's insight teetered on the edge of the abyssal currents. Merely writing it down had taken hours. I could only form 1 or 2 figures at a time, as the full impact always threatened to overwhelm what little mental control I could muster. I'd had to cover my previous work with a book to stop me seeing the whole. Raine had to keep dragging me into the kitchen, forcefully distracting me, feeding me hot chocolate, mop up the leaking nosebleed. At one point she'd taken me to bed and kept me there for 3 hours, and that was the only thing that really helped, kept it all at bay. I'd used this equation once before, yes, but that had been in a dire situation, driven on and protected by the heat of the moment. Now I had to perform cold. I was desperate for any excuse to put it off, do it tomorrow, do it next week, wait until February. My birthday was soon, on the 17th. Why not wait until I turned 20, finally out of my teens? Surely I'd feel different, this wouldn't be so daunting, a real adult wouldn't feel so scared. I didn't really believe any of that, but I still entertained the thought, if only for a moment or two. The 17th was Maisie's birthday as well. I forced myself to pick up the sheet of paper and turn to the bucket next to it. I'll take Preem, I said, to nobody in particular. It's just a test. Just like sitting an exam. I'm good at exams. You can do it, Raine said, suddenly loud and clear in the close quiet of the drawing room. This is nothing, Heather, this is a flick of the wrist for you. You'll be right back, and then we'll go take a bath. Together, yeah. Don't forget to bring something back, Evelyn said. Or you'll have to do it all over again. A book off the floor will be fine. Half a book. I nodded, didn't need telling that again, she'd repeated it enough times over the last week. Preem, come here please, I said, hand outstretched, not trusting my legs to carry me to her. Preem joined me, heels clicking, my coat still over her arm, her skirt swishing around her ankles. I'd pinned her long blonde hair up in a braided bun for her earlier that morning. I think she liked it. She stared at my proffered hand for a moment. You have to take my hand, or this doesn't work. And hold on. She unfolded her hands and slipped her warm little palm into mine. All too human. Don't you get any funny ideas now, Raine warned her, still trying to crack jokes. Okay, I'm ready, You want a countdown? Raine asked. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Oh, for all the dash. Yes, I blurted out. Yes, I would. Please, Raine, go ahead. Do that. Count me down. On 0? Cool. Here we go then. I'll see you in a minute or two, Heather. She held up 3 fingers. 3. 2. I counted with her, chest tight, palms sweating, animal terror crawling in the back of my head. 1, we said together. Evelyn joined in too, and even Preem spoke the word. My mouth was so dry. Raine closed her hand, made a fist. 0. My courage held. I flipped the piece of notepaper over. I read the equation. My mind plunged into boiling tar. I grit my teeth, ignored the nosebleed that streamed down my face, and forced myself to concentrate on each piece of molten truth as I slotted it into place. Shaking hard, wincing, throat raw. Preparation and experience helped, but only to a point. I hunched forward around my clenched stomach, holding on hard and trying not to vomit. I wasn't going to use that bucket. I was not. I was better than this, I was stronger, I was. The equation burned, rose to a shining crescendo of pain, an expanding iron vice instead in my head. I had to use the bucket. Preem held me up, an arm under my shoulders, as I shook all over, but I made it, I got there in the end. Last piece. Exactly the same feeling as the first time, the same violation of natural law, the same slipping black levers under my hands. A snapshot of insane kaleidoscope before I slammed my eyes shut. Reality crumpled under its own weight, and went out. The difference? This time I knew where I was going. When we'd arrived back in Sherrowford at the end of the previous week, we discovered that number 12, Barnslow Drive had not been raided, vandalized, marked, egged, or otherwise violated by the Sherrowford cult. Evelyn was correct, they hadn't come anywhere near the house. We couldn't find hide nor hair of them. That hadn't stopped Raine from making us wait in the car. I'd felt increasingly ridiculous as Raine crept up the garden path and unlocked the door, slipping her handgun from inside her leather jacket once she was over the threshold, but I suppose it was necessary. She'd checked over the house, the back garden, and even up the street. Nothing. Once inside, the familiar scents exposed floorboards, old iron radiators, tiles and the kitchen had coaxed a bizarre feeling from me, an emotion out in the no man's land between nostalgia and heartache. 2 weeks away from the house had lent it a touch of the welcome uncanny. Raine had bustled about and Evelyn set to making tea, but I'd crept around from room to room, waved hello to the spider servitor in the drawing room, and even opened the door onto the back garden to check on Tenny. She wiggled her tentacles at me, but wouldn't come inside. The Sherrowford house smelled like home. How very strange, after spending time at my parents' house, my childhood home in Reading. That was supposed to be home, wasn't it? A few days with my parents had felt exhausting. They'd been effusive with their protestations that my friends were very welcome, but I'd picked up on their caution, their one-step remove, their exaggerated politeness. Or was that me, projecting my own feelings? I hadn't had time to consider that, let alone think about the abstract concept of home, between worrying about every little thing Raine did, fielding my mother's endless questions, and dealing with the uncanny sensation of my new friends in my old house. That was the most exhausting part, not fretting over drama, or being amazed when Evelyn got to discussing actual medieval philosophy with my father. I had to deal with all the memories of my sister rushing back again, with Raine and Evelyn aware and my parents oblivious. Raine got it, or at least pretended she did. We talked it over, alone in the old back garden, recounting all the little things I remembered about my twin. Evelyn did a magical test in my old bedroom, of course. The bedroom where Maisie and I had wiggled down the rabbit hole to Wonderland a decade ago, where every trace of her had been erased. Whatever had happened to us had left no echo, no clue. Recovering from the map, at least that was easy. In the end, Evelyn had let the fox go, with much grumbling. I'd been weak and disoriented that afternoon, sat on the patio as she'd freed the animal on the back lawns of the same mansion, sipping from my hot chocolate and trying not to think about the structure of reality. The fox had scarpered off right quick, as Raine put it, and left Preem holding the empty cage as it bounded toward the lake and the trees. It hadn't looked back. We spotted it twice more before we left the following morning for my parents, a russet snout watching us from the bushes, a tail whipping back into the gates of the estate as we'd pulled away down the cramped country lane. I wished it well, if it was indeed what Evelyn thought it was. 2 days back in Sherrowford, with the new university term about to start, we'd had a meeting. None of us had called a meeting, nothing so formal. We drifted toward it naturally, after a day of recovery from too much socializing with my parents. I could get some paint, cover the whole thing up. Raine's voice drifted into the kitchen. I bit into a Pop-Tart and followed the sound as she spoke. Wouldn't take 5 minutes. Might need a second coat though, some of this looks pretty thick. Is this bit carved into the plaster? That needs some polyfiller. I poked my head around the open doorway to Evelyn's magical workshop, and saw Raine standing with her hands on her hips as she surveyed the wreckage of the cult's doorway portal thing. The huge mandala, complete with Lazzie's modifications, still dominated the entire wall. Absolutely not, Evelyn grunted from a chair by the cluttered table. I'm keeping it. You aren't worried they'll bust on through one night? Raine turned and saw me peeking, 2 freshly toasted chocolate Pop-Tarts on a plate in my hands, half of one already in my mouth. Hey you, did you get bored? Come and join us, we're talking shop. I grunted, then swallowed, with some difficulty. I was waiting, I thought you were coming back upstairs. Raine pulled this big theatrical wince. She'd taken to doing that sometimes, that in lieu of saying sorry, and it worked quite handily on me, because it was incredibly attractive. I got totally sidetracked and I saw Evelyn talking to herself in here. My bad. Talking to yourself is entirely healthy, thank you very much, Evelyn said. You know what isn't healthy? Leaving your girlfriend alone in bed in the middle of whatever it is you two do behind closed doors. Go on, shoo, the pair of you. We were playing a video game, that's all. I felt myself blush, but only a tiny bit, and shook my head as Raine laughed. Yes, and I ran a marathon yesterday, Evelyn muttered. And no, Raine, I'm not worried about the cult using this again. The network it connected to is collapsed, there's nothing left. I've got Preem out on Boder Street now, poking her nose into the last of their pocket spaces. They're done. But this, I can repurpose this, I'm certain, if I can figure out the last few bits of Akkadian. I crossed the threshold into the drawing room, feeling curious and attentive, though I'd much rather return to watching Raine seduce video game girls who were also dragons. I glanced up at the spider servitor, upside down in its corner, watching the room with that head of crystalline eyes. The sight of it still unsettled me on a visceral level, the black carapace, the heat exchangers, the poised stingers, but then again so did Tenny, and I felt a measure of odd affection for the spider. It had, after all, crouched on guard over my unconscious body after Zheng had tried to kidnap me, and I had no illusions about who would have won if she'd decided to come back and fight it. I gave it a little wave of greeting, but got nothing in return. Heather? I blinked around at my friends, and then flushed when I remembered they couldn't see what I was waving at. T the spider, I was just saying hi. Oh yeah, big leggy up there, Raine said. How's he hanging? Fine. Healthy. I mean, as far as Servitors experience health. Evelyn shrugged. Good question. Why, you said Preem's gone out? I hurried to change the subject. Even now, after all these months, the old instinctive habit still held a lot of ground inside my head. Don't let on that you see things other people don't. Is she still wearing her bow? That would be a no, then. Evelyn answered by pointing to the back of a nearby chair. Preem's beloved maid uniform was neatly folded over the back. Certainly not. I'm not sure psychological self-correction can account for a maid wandering around Sherrowford. I ordered her into jeans and a coat. She caught the look on my face and sighed. She's free to wear whatever she likes when she gets back. That's okay, I wasn't being dash. It's fine, Evelyn grunted. It obviously wasn't fine. Still sore about her demon sartorial tastes. I busied myself chewing on another mouthful of Pop-Tart. If I saw her walking around in that getup, I'd hit on her, Raine said. So would I said softly, and Raine spluttered with laughter. I blushed and shrugged and took another bite. Of course I wouldn't have the courage, but I'd like to. I swallowed and spoke into the silence that followed, asked the question that had been lurking in the back of my head, the real reason I'd stepped into the room. So, what do we do next? Raine raised her eyebrows at me. You want to head out for some lunch before it rains again? That Indian deli place is open again. Don't be so bloody obtuse, Evelyn snapped at her. Raine had the good sense to look mock sheepish. She'd known exactly what I really meant. Evelyn turned in her chair to regard me. I thought the answer to that was obvious. You need to test what you can do. I stepped up to the table and put my plate down, stomach turning, sugary breakfast treat sitting like lead. That was what I'd been afraid of, the fear itself. I know that part. I mean, how ready are we? For Maisie? Raine asked. For Wonderland, Evelyn corrected her. Not in the slightest. Yes, I know. I'm asking, I sighed and shrugged. I don't know what I'm asking. Evelyn held up a hand, 4 fingers, and lowered them one by one as she made her points. 1, you can get there, in theory. In theory, I agreed. True enough, Raine added softly. 4, if the eye resists our interference, itself or with its minions, we don't have much to fight back with. You absolutely aren't ready to go toe-to-toe or mind-to-mind, as it were with the eye, are you? Right, I nodded, deflating inside. Definitely not. So, I would say we're not bloody well ready at all. When she put it like that, I struggled to see light at the end of the tunnel. We had, 8 or 9 months? How on earth could we achieve all that in 8 or 9 months? I'd proposed to fight an alien god for my sister's life. I'd found its address in a cosmic phone book. Now what? What if we ding-dong dash it? Raine asked. What? Evelyn squinted at her. You know. Ding-dong dash. Knock and Nash, Raine said. Knock on its front door and run away. Good way to see how it reacts to us rocking up to mess with it, yeah. Evelyn gave her such a look. Raine shrugged, don't blame me style. I was barely paying attention, lost in my own thoughts. I should have been listening. Raine's idea was golden, but none of us would work that out for weeks yet. The map had gifted me with insight, but not an insight I cared to examine in too much detail. The afternoon after I'd exposed my mind to the map, we tried a couple of small experiments. Raine had fetched a couple of small stones from down by the lake on the Say estate. She'd wanted me to wait, to recover until I didn't feel sick and shaky, but I'd insisted. I had to try it then, see if it worked, see if I could put this knowledge to use. Grasp a rock and send it outside, send it somewhere specific. The first rock I sent to the grand winterbound castle which Lozzie had taken me to in the dream. It hurt like hell. Dialing in a specific location, plane, level, dimension, whatever flimsy inadequate human word we use for outside, took a toll on my concentration. I'd dredged up the geographic principles from the map and wedded them to the eye's impossible physics. The rock had vanished from my hand, and I'd curled up around my aching stomach and lungs for an entire hour, nursing my pounding head and bleeding nose. The rock had gone exactly where I'd intended. How did I know that? It was like throwing an object down a long, lightless corridor, through a doorway I knew stood at the end, deep in darkness. The second rock, I sent to Wonderland. A risk, certainly. Would the eye notice? How all-encompassing was its awareness? Could it somehow trace an inanimate object back to me? Let it try. I was protected, by the fractal on my arm and my friends and Evie's magic and my own growing mastery. Right? None of that sheltered me from the thought of that rock. Lying awake in bed, snuggled between Raine's arms, still cold inside despite her borrowed body heat, it haunted me. A pebble from a lakeside in rural England, lost beneath that rotten sky, amid the broken walls and otherworldly monsters of Wonderland. And it would never, ever come back. Who could find a tiny, pointless pebble, amid all that madness, beneath the gaze of the eye? I will award no prizes for unraveling the subconscious metaphor. If Raine is quite finished with her helpful suggestions, Evelyn said, the sound of her voice bringing me back to the drawing room. I may have a solution to that first problem. Which one, sorry? I asked with a sniff. Raine crossed the room and pulled a chair out for me, encouraged me into it and started rubbing my shoulders. She'd probably seen the look on my face, figured out I needed physical contact. Getting to Wonderland and back, said Evelyn, and gestured at the doorway mural. The door. If you bring an object back from outside, anything at all, I believe I may be able, in theory, to repurpose the doorway to connect to that particular point. I blinked at her. Window on ye old, I didn't go so well last time, Raine said before I could. Yes, absolutely. It was a disaster, I agreed, frowning with concern. I thought that was the entire purpose of showing me the map. So I could get us there. Alone and passing out, as I said, Evelyn repeated. Look, I'm certainly not suggesting you, what do you call it, slip. Don't slip to Wonderland, that's stupid and you'll probably die, or worse. No, we need to test this first, in as controlled conditions as we can get. Where can you go? We need somewhere safe. Safe, outside? I sighed. Relatively. I don't know, I admitted. There's places Lozzie and I went in the dreams which weren't that bad, or at least quiet, but I always got the feeling that outside was less dangerous when accessed via dreams. I don't know. You'll have to ask your Lozzie about that one, I have no idea, Evelyn said. I suppose. But I couldn't ask Lozzie, could I? She'd been gone for weeks. I'd hoped, in my own childish way, that she might return for Christmas, come back all smiles and giggling. I didn't even dream about her anymore. The thought of her outside formed a lump in my throat. Raine squeezed my shoulder. She'll be back, Heather, I'm sure she will. I nodded, chewing on my lip. Raine couldn't possibly be sure, but I let her convince me for now. My mind finally alighted on the sort of place I associated with safety and quiet, security and pleasure. There was the library, I said. Library? Evelyn's eyebrows pinched together, sudden sharp interest. She took you to a library? Raine asked, and mock tutade. Trying to get one up on me. I'll have to have a word with Lozzie about that, muscling in on me. One of the places Lozzie took me in the dreams, yes. She called it the Library of Carcosa, I think. It didn't seem too, Evie. Evelyn squinted at me in fascination. I hadn't seen that look on her face since she'd marveled over my self-implementing hyperdimensional mathematics. Carcosa? Evelyn breathed. Carcosa. You're certain she used that name? I think that's how it was pronounced, yes. I take it that's important. Potentially, Evelyn said, with great care. Her eyes bored into me. I wish you'd told me before. Can you get back there? I shrugged. In theory, I can go anywhere. Why is this important, Evie? Evelyn took a deep breath and banished the worst of her fascinated look with an obvious effort of will, bringing herself back down to the level of us mere mortals. Carcosa is a city, of a sort, mentioned by name in more than a few of the grimoires I have access to. There's a whole 5-page passage in Unbecanti Orte. She wet her lips, and I swear I saw her tremble slightly. The library. There may be relevant books. One's lost here, lost to reality. You want to visit a library, outside? I tried to laugh, but the look in Evelyn's eyes told me she was dead serious. She opened her mouth, but snapped it shut again, clamping down on something inside herself. Evie. I can't. She took a deep breath and forced a humorless laugh. You need to understand, Heather, this presents me with a dangerous temptation. A selfish part of me, perhaps the part one inherited from my mother Dash. Evie, no. Very much wants to visit that library and pilfer as many books as I can, she carried right on, raising a hand. If I was being mercenary, I would tell you there might be books there we can use, things that might help us locate your sister, even more so if you're not going to be able to pit your mind against the eye. And that wouldn't be a lie. Oh. That pang of guilt. Evie, come off it, that is being mercenary, Raine said. But hey, if it might help. Perhaps, Evelyn admitted. But you do need to test the map, and I need to test the door. The library, well, Evelyn shrugged. What Evie's saying, Raine added, still rubbing my shoulders. Is that it's your choice, this is your circus, Heather. I took a deep breath and tried to sit up straight, tried to feel big. I did not. I am large and in charge, I said, closed my eyes and nodded. I'll do it. A trip to the library. Head throbbing like an open wound, diaphragm aching, guts throwing a terminal stage riot. Preen caught my weight as I sagged forward. My feet skittered for purchase against the polished wooden floor, kicking at stray books and loose pages, the sound echoing into the vast space overhead. A sticky, gummy feeling seeped around my closed eyelids as I hacked for breath and heaved again. Preen quickly pressed a plastic bag into my hands and I voided my stomach once more, wiped my lips and dropped the bag, and failed to stand up as my knees gave out. Preem had to catch me again. She held me up with effortless ease. We are here, she intoned, voice echoing off into nothingness. I didn't need her to tell me that. I was outside, under my own power. My second ever intentional slip. Went off without a hitch except for all the pain and the vomiting and the bleeding. Book, I croaked. Need a book. Back out. That was right, back out, back to reality, back to Raine and that bath together. Book, Preem acknowledged, but then I realized she couldn't bend down without letting me tumble to my knees. With stinging effort, I eased my eyelids open, rubbed at the blood around my eye sockets, and squinted so I could see. Mercy of mercies, I had at least brought us to the right place. The library of Carcosa looked exactly as I remembered it from the dream Lozzie and I had shared. We stood at the bottom of a wide canyon of bookcases at least a mile across, the floor covered with thousands of discarded texts. The bookcases vanished into the dark, far far above, crossed and looped by hundreds of wooden walkways and balconies. Billions of books. Beyond counting. Without the cushion of the dream, I did not like it one bit. All was shrouded in soft, unnatural light and deep amorphous shadows. I concentrated on the floor, at the discarded books, not at the tiny robed figures shuffling along the walkways above, their faces made of tentacles and spines, or at the hanging cages that contained inhuman skeletons, and certainly not at the giant chains and the nightmare shape they held suspended in the far middle of the canyon. Book, any book, I croaked, and bent forward, scooping up the first volume that came to hand. Preem helped me straighten again, and I stared at her for a second. None the worse for where at all, are you? None the worse, she echoed, milk-white eyes steadfast, uniform utterly unruffled. Shoo, don't want to, I gestured vaguely, but nothing out there seemed to respond to the echoing sound of Preem's voice. My stomach turned again, knees wobbling as I struggled to stay standing. Quickly, I let the book flop open in one hand, no language I recognized, but it was indeed a book, black marks on white pages, rather than something else disguised as a book. I handed it to Preem and lifted the piece of notepaper again, now crumpled and squeezed, stained with nosebleed and a few flecks of vomit. Strictly speaking, I didn't need the equation on paper to get back. I could run through the whole thing from memory, from instinct, from a decade of the Eye's lessons. But the notation would help, make it gentler on my mind. I needed so badly to sit down. A little more pain, and it would be over, I told myself, back to Sherrowford, home, and my friends. I turned the paper over and my eyes flickered down the equation, the first red-hot iron pokers slamming into my skull. That's when I spotted her. Maybe half a mile away. How did I see her so clearly across the floor of that library canyon? Half hidden behind a banister at the edge of a staircase up into the stacks. Staring at me. Maybe it was the long blonde hair, messy and unkempt, or the way she folded the ends of her sleeves over her hands, or simply the outline of her skinny form against the shadows. Lozzie. My eyes jerked up from the paper, halfway through the equation, her name on my lips, certain she hadn't been there a second ago. Her face half a mile distant, but inches away, every feature in the right place, but nothing like itself. Something wearing her skin. I lost my train of thought. Hyperdimensional mathematics fell apart inside my head, a nuclear meltdown which made me clench every muscle in my body, vision throbbing black around the edges. I cried out, pain and blood in my mouth, eyes stinging like acid. My head felt like it exploded. Preem caught me as I passed out. The last thing I saw was Lozzie. She turned, and walked away. Preem brought me round by slapping me in the face. Consciousness returned, sharp and cold. I gasped, and Preem stopped. It was neither the most painful or the most panicked awakening I'd experienced, but it was far from pleasant. At least it beat waking up in a puddle of my own sick. Spluttering for breath through the taste of bile, I peeled my bloodied face off the floorboards and flailed as I tried to sit up, confused, unsure where I was, lost behind blurred vision and eyelids sticky with blood. Halfway to a sitting position, a gasp of pain seized my raw throat, my diaphragm ached like my insides had been flayed and my head pounded so hard each throb made me want to vomit again. I curled up around my stomach, wheezing, struggling to look up at Preem and wipe the blood-stuck hair out of my face. She'd rolled me into the recovery position and covered me with my coat. Good demon, yes, thank you Preem. The doll demon straightened up and quickly looked away, her attention elsewhere. Her right hand was smeared with crimson where she'd been slapping my cheek. I reached out, numb and woozy. Had to get to my feet. Had to get up. To find what? Where were we? My mind whirled, fuzzy and slow. Outside, yes, the test, the plan to bring back a book, the Library of Carcosa, then. Lazi. Memory slammed back into place and I pushed my feet underneath me, forced shaking legs to take my weight. I could barely stand, and blundered into Preem. She was fast enough to give me her arm for support, a handhold to cling to, but my head still swam with throbbing pain, vision edged with black. I hung on to Preem for what seemed an eternity, head down, fighting the pain. She picked up my coat again and draped it over my shoulders. "Leave," Preem intoned, loud and clear. I winced through clenched teeth. "Leave, now." Absolutely not. Lazi was here, just beyond the shadows and my own blurred vision. She'd turned and walked away, up into the winding maze of the library staircases, but I'd seen her, I'd seen a face twisted into alien emotion. Barely her. Lazi's facial muscles had all pulled in the wrong directions, tensed and relaxed in the wrong order, at the wrong angles, like an inhuman hand puppeting her from beneath the skin. No, 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 Lazi, no. If I hadn't been racked with brainmath fumble aftershocks and a headache fit to kill a bear, I believe I would have wept. How could this happen to her? She'd insisted she was meant to be out here, to be outside. She was supposed to be safe, from her uncle, from the cult, at home in the inhuman wilderness, and what had happened to her? Even worse, too unthinkable, had she invited this change? I couldn't bear it, couldn't bear what it implied, for both of us. I had to find her. If I'd had a clear mind, I would have posed myself a much more pertinent question: how had I seen all that detail at half a mile distant? Impossible. A side effect of the throes of brain math? If so, that was new. Should have been paying attention. Frantic, still not certain what I'd seen before passing out, I heaved myself round, desperate to find any scrap of Lazi, and managed to almost fall over again. Preem caught me under the shoulders to stop me landing on my face, and hauled me as upright as I could stand. "Need to leave," she said, voice clear as a silver bell. We had company. Several inhabitants of the Library of Carcosa had descended into the bookcase canyon, to see what all the fuss was about. 4 figures, maybe 100 meters away. Tall, perhaps 6 or 7 feet, lean and humanoid beneath long ragged robes but lumpy and rippling, as if they possessed unspeakable concealed appendages in addition to their grayish hands and forearms. Great masses of ropey gray tentacles hung and twitched in place of faces, set between long spines like those of a sea urchin, no eyes or mouths or noses, though their faces pointed at Preem and I as if watching through human eyes. The boldest of the librarians, creeping forward at the head of their group, carried a large book tucked into its armpit and a barbed metal cattle crook in the other hand. The others didn't look as confident as they approached. They were empty-handed except for one carrying a pair of books, as if the tentacle face had been busy sorting volumes, its work interrupted by a human girl noisily passing out on the floor. The rearmost figure seemed wary, craning to look over his companion's shoulders. Another knot of the creatures was descending a staircase at the edge of the canyon, a couple of them pointing toward us. How did they dash? I croaked, forced myself to swallow. How long was I unconscious? 37 minutes, 12 seconds, Preem said. Half an hour. Oh God, my stomach turned over. Leave, Preem intoned. But Lazi, she was right there, I have to dash. I lurched out of Preem's grip, toward the stairs where I'd seen Lazi. Half a mile distant, through some of the most bizarre creatures I'd ever encountered, on legs that could barely carry me half a meter, while bleeding from my eye sockets. The plan lay in tatters. None of that mattered. It wasn't courage or stupidity, but a kind of desperate selfish panic. I had to find Lazi, I needed to know what had happened to her. I made it 2 paces before Preem threw her arms around my waist. She held on tight, hugged my back. I squirmed to pull free, but in my current state I couldn't have escaped a wet paper bag, let alone Preem. Raine was strong, much stronger than me, all well-trained toned muscle. She could hold me down without breaking a sweat, pick me up without much effort, and swing a bat hard enough to break bones. Preem's strength was so far beyond Raine, they weren't even comparable. She had bad leverage and a poor angle, but she gripped me like a granite statue. She was dash, I heaved with nausea for a moment, on the verge of emptying my guts a second time. She understood, let me bend forward. Lozzie, it was Lozzie. Didn't you see? I have to. We must leave. But didn't you see? Damn you dash, I pulled at her arms again, on the verge of hysteria. That was her, wasn't it? Preem stared past me, impassive, up at the spot Lozzie had so briefly occupied, then at the approaching tentacle-faced people. I saw, she said. Then let's go after her. Please, Preem, please. You can fight these monsters, can't you? I know you can. I have to get her, I have to know dash. Promised, Preem intoned. Best look after her. That dumped a bucket of cold water on my mounting hysteria, Raine's words to Preem, back in Sherrowford. The doll demon had promised to look after me. Raine and Evelyn were waiting, with no idea why I was overdue. Raine would be worried sick. She'd never show it, never let on in the moment, and as soon as I got back she'd be all practical care and tender smiling encouragement. She loved me, and perhaps the way I felt about Lozzie right now was a shade of how she worried for me. You can't make me, I muttered. Voice weak, my heart wasn't really in the words. I did hold the real power here, I determined our return. I'd dropped the notepaper with the equation, now lost amid the mess of discarded books on the floor, but I could perform it all from memory, at the speed of thought, at the cost of a little more agony. Preem said nothing, arms tight around my waist, taking my sagging weight on her front. Together we stared at the approaching tentacle faces, the librarians. They'd reach us in a minute or two, and even though they looked uncertain and wary I would rather they keep their distance. A crazed part of me wanted to refuse, make the doll demon choose between fighting the tentacle faces or picking me up and running, give her no option but to help me find Lozzie. I couldn't. Didn't have the heart, couldn't stop thinking about Raine. Left my sister behind for 10 years, and now Lozzie's lost herself outside and I can't even go after her. I choked back a sob. Leave, Preem repeated. Okay. Okay, yes. You have the book, don't you? I'm not doing this again. Preem waggled one of her hands to show me, the book still firmly in her grip. Hang on tight, okay? Snug, she said. I closed my eyes, shut out the library of Carcosa, the tentacle faces, the spot I'd seen Lozzie, my own wordless horror, and began once more the set of mind-searing, neuron-shattering equations to take us home. It wasn't her, Evelyn said. Slowly, eyelids still heavy as lead, I blinked up at Evelyn from where I sat on the floor, propped against foot of the sofa in the drawing room. Raine looked up too, another piece of dark chocolate in her hand, paused halfway to my mouth. I tried to grunt, managed only a slightly louder puff of breath. Felt like I was dead. It wasn't your Lozzie. I blinked again. My eyes ached, my head throbbed with every beat of my heart, and my chest felt like a gaping hole where my lungs should be. Upon returning from outside slumping against Preem and spitting blood as reality crashed back, I'd spent the last shreds of my energy trying to explain what I'd seen. I'd blurted out sentence fragments, spluttering and coughing, even as Raine had jumped out of her chair to take me from Preem's arms. You're late. Evelyn had snapped, sitting bolt upright, face a mask of thunder. I'd managed to say Lozzie's name, summoned enough numb-lipped incoherency to mutter about something in her skin, and have to find her, all wrong, before I'd all but collapsed onto the floor, with Raine's hands cradling my head. Preem had come to my rescue. As Raine had propped me against the sofa and checked my airways were clear, Preem had turned to Evelyn and begun to explain in her clipped, clear tones. We saw Lozzie, she'd said. Awaiting us. She was all wrong. Wrong? Evelyn had snapped, glancing between the doll demon and my vacant expression, Raine already tending to my face with a warm towel and a tub of water. She clicked her fingers at Preem. Explain. And hand me that book, that's it. That's what you picked up. I drifted. Not the pleasant oblivion of long-awaited sleep, but identical to the first time I'd returned from an intentional slip, numb, distant, my body a shell I inhabited at whim, a whim I was on the verge of forgetting. All my panic about Lozzie turned to mist in the wind. I felt Raine's hands on my face and forehead, wiping the blood and the bile from my lips, telling me I was home, I was safe, and it was all okay, but I wasn't really there. She tended to a thin veneer over a void. The void was me, I was it, and it was all. She lifted strong lukewarm coffee to my lips and forced me to sip, fed me tiny nibbles of dark chocolate. The taste and perhaps the caffeine and serotonin began to drag me back up into my own body, into my senses. I took a deep breath and coughed once. Hey there Heather, she murmured, stroking my hair. You did good, you did real good. I'm really proud of you. You're not hurt anywhere, are you? Heather. Everywhere, I croaked. Raine smiled and sighed with relief. She recognized a joke when she heard it. Evelyn entered my field of vision, frowning down at me with rare naked concern. She tapped Raine with her walking stick. Don't stop feeding her, you negligent reprobate. Give her the whole bar if you have to, there's plenty more in the kitchen. Yes ma'am, don't have to tell me twice. Raine lifted the square of chocolate to my mouth again. Feed myself, I muttered. I tried to take it from her, but raising my arm all that way was too difficult. I let my limp hands fall into my lap, let Raine feed me, concentrated on the taste and the orchestra of aches and pains reminding me I was alive. Evelyn had resumed her chair, and that's when she decided I hadn't seen Lozzie. It wasn't Lozzie, she repeated, frowning, tight and thoughtful, as if watching my reactions very closely. Raine nodded at Preem. She sounded pretty conclusive to me. Evelyn shook her head. Am I the only one here with two brain cells left to rub together? Unfair, I croaked. You saw what looked like Lozzie, yes, that much I accept, of course I do, Evelyn said. Forgive me for pointing out the obvious, but the chances of her and you running across each other outside are infinitesimally small. She paused and spread her hands. Am I talking to myself here? The horror of seeing Lozzie in that state came creeping back, a cold hand up my spine, digging fingernails of ice into my flesh. I shook, breathing harder. But she, what dash? Raine placed a hand on my forehead, cool and soft. Shoo, Heather, we can figure all this out, I promise. Evie, this can wait. No, it can't, I spluttered. What do you mean? I mean it wasn't her. Evelyn frowned at me like I'd turned into an idiot. Perhaps I had. Think it through, 4-5 seconds. You saw her at that exact spot, a place you chose from dozens of possible locations you'd visited with her. And she was waiting for you. At the exact minute you chose to go outside. And she doesn't call out for help or run to you, she walks off, into the unknown. And you really believe that was her? She glanced up at Preem. What about you, you believe this nonsense? Preem offered no opinion. She was there I had to pause for breath. Because it was somewhere we went pain. Together. She was waiting to ask for help. It was an anglerfish. It was bait. Evelyn spat the word. Evie, hey now, come on. Raine raised both hands. Heather, you need a hot bath 30 seconds ago. I know how much Lozzie means to you, and I promise we dash. It was her. I yelled at Evelyn, but managed only a wheeze and an awful, body-racking coughing fit. I curled up around my aching chest and whined through my teeth. Evelyn didn't deserve my anger. I was lashing out in fear and frustration. She was merely the closest target. She looked taken aback, blinking at me and averting her eyes. She opened her mouth but I waved one weak hand at her, trying to apologize. Lassie's fate mattered to me on so many different levels I could barely unravel them while lying awake in bed, let alone in pain and infinite numbness, eyelids still sticky with blood, trying to sort through what I'd seen. Lassie and I had shared so much, experiences I couldn't share with anybody else, even Raine. She'd shown me outside through eyes unclouded by horror, filled with wonder and otherworldly beauty, a vision I still couldn't reach on my own. And I cared about her, deeply, on a level I didn't fully get. She was like a little sister or a cousin I needed to take care of. She'd been abused and used and hurt and I wanted her to be safe, she had to be safe, I needed to make her safe. Because she was like me. And if she could lose herself outside, what did that mean? Heather, hey, it's okay, just try to breathe, focus on your breathing. Raine helped me sit up again, stroked my hair uncaring of the blood, gentle fingers rubbing the back of my neck. Just focus on breathing. Am I going to end up like that? I wheezed. Is Dash? I couldn't voice the rest, the real question. Raine and Evelyn shared a glance. There's no reason to think like that, Evelyn said quickly. Of course not. You're right here with us, Raine added, her voice a soft purr just for me. You're completely safe, Heather. The only reason you're ever going outside is to get your sister back, right? She grinned, all brimming confidence. There's nothing to be afraid of. And I'm sure Lassie's fine. What you saw was not Lassie, Evelyn repeated. I squinted at her. Not her, Preem echoed. See? Evelyn thumbed at Preem. It was something native to the library, most likely. It plucked a relevant fear, a relevant desire from your mind. An anglerfish's bait, a light to lure the unwary. Why do you think it was Lassie, Anglerfish, Preem echoed. I shrugged, drained, utterly exhausted. Because if it had been Raine, or myself, you would have known instantly it wasn't real, Evelyn said, as if explaining a principle to a very slow child. She sighed heavily. You're obviously worn out. You panicked. Any of us would, of course. Whatever it was, it chose Lassie to lead you on. It wasn't her, not the real one. She's probably on some tropical beach with her feet up. Or playing with spirits, Raine said, and cracked another grin as she glanced up, at the house, at the Sherrowford cold and the Sherrowford rain beyond the walls. If I could go anywhere, it'd be the south of France for both us. Not this. Somewhere hot, I croaked, nodding. Their argument made sense. Preem agreed too. Bait, a thought plucked from my mind. Perfect sense. My eyes burned, hot and wet, vision blurring again. I sniffed hard, and felt tears run down my cheeks. I choked back a sob, crying because I missed Lassie, and didn't know where she was, if she was safe, or dead. Or worse. By the following weekend and 2 days after my 20th birthday I'd not forgotten about Lassie one bit, but I had managed to convince myself that Evelyn was correct. I couldn't sleep right. Not the bone-shattering exhaustion of the terminal weeks before I'd first met Raine, no nightmares or terrors, not reluctant to face what lurked on the other side of unconsciousness. Instead I found myself restless and awake in Raine's arms, an unquiet mind in the night, or getting up to wander the house and sit in the still darkness, reading in Evelyn's little private library, or watching Tenny out in the garden before the cold drove me back under the covers. Lassie alone wasn't enough to keep me up at night. I was terribly worried about her, yes, of course I was, even if that thing I'd seen outside wasn't her. When she'd left, after we'd freed her from her brother, I'd tried my best to accept her decision, but now I'd been outside again, lost to my friends for half an hour, Raine and Evelyn left behind to wonder what had happened to me. That sharpened the hurt all over again. I missed her. That vision in Carcosa, Lassie puppet by an alien presence inside her skin even if it wasn't real, please don't let it be real, God, please I couldn't get it out of my head. Couldn't stop thinking about what it implied. Months ago, when we'd first sketched our plan to save my sister, Evelyn had cautioned against hope. The memory of her words kept me up at night. Nothing human can survive out there for long, she'd said. How much of Maisie was left to save? Despite the supernatural underworld we inhabited, in the end I was still a university student, with few responsibilities except lectures and essays. Lucky me. I caught up by sleeping in late, or napped at Raine's insistent encouragement. I was worrying her, especially on the 2 occasions she woke and came looking for me at night, uncertain where I'd gone, uncertain perhaps if I was still present in reality at all. The second time that happened she made extra sure to remind me that I was very much accounted for in the physical. I got even less sleep that particular night, but I didn't mind. And so, that's why I was curled up in bed at 11 in the morning on a Sunday, 2 days after my birthday, dozing and fretting, surrounded by Raine's lingering scent, when I managed to embarrass myself. Heather. Raine called up the stairs. There was a laugh in her voice, floating through the open bedroom door. Wakey wakey, sleeping beauty. Somebody down here's got a present for you. I rolled over, certain that the present was Raine's metaphor for bacon and eggs, or at the long odds that Tenny had brought a dead mouse to the back door, or Preem had sewn me a maid uniform. It couldn't be that Evelyn had made any progress with the doorway portal, that would hardly warrant a laugh. Heather? You awake up there? Raine called again. Awake, I echoed back. I'll be down in a minute. Still, I was most unwilling to exile myself from the warm bed. Eventually I sat up, rubbed at my face, and grumbled most ungratefully about how breakfast in bed would be easier. I didn't really mean it though. I wasn't that spoiled. At least now I had a new and wonderfully comfortable method to keep the cold at bay. No need to pull on thick socks, or wrap myself up in a hoodie. I took my heat with me, carefully guarded. I even popped the hood up and set the ears standing, playful for Raine's benefit, as I padded quietly down the stairs, across the front room and into the kitchen, following the scent of fresh coffee. Here she is, queen of the hour, Raine said, from over by the kettle. 1 coffee for me, and tea for her and 1 mug for our guest. Hey Heath, dash. Twill did a double take at me. At my luxurious, brand new, calico pattern cat onesie. Oh. I yanked the hood down, blushing terribly, trying to smile. Twill. Good morning, yes, hello. Hello. Twill looked me up and down, mouth open, then back to where Preem stood in her maid uniform by the door to Evelyn's magical workshop. Okay. 1 I can deal with. 2, I ain't so sure. It was a present. I blurted out, blushing red as a tomato, trying to sort out my terribly messy hair all bunched down the back of the onesie. A birthday present. And it's warm. And really comfy. Really. A present, right. Twill glanced at Raine, looking very uncertain, ready to bolt. From you? Is this some weird furry shit? And why is the demon dressed like a porn star again? No judgment, though. You do you, all you. Raine burst out laughing, shaking her head and almost dropping the tea bag she was extracting from a mug. From Evie, I corrected her with a huff. It's absolutely not a sex thing. It was because of a bet, but it's actually really comfortable. I shook my head inside. Raine, why didn't you tell me we had company? I would have gotten dressed properly. I did tell you, Raine said with a smirk, placing the mugs on the table. I sighed and reached for my coffee. And hey, Twill doesn't count as company dash. Oi. Twill barked. She's one of us, Raine finished, with a raised eyebrow at Twill. Yeah, right, that's better. Twill cleared her throat. And Preem, I said with a gesture toward the doll demon, is dressed in the clothing she prefers. She discovered that herself, while we were visiting Evelyn's house. Doesn't she look good? It suits her. Yeah. Much preferred, Preem added, staring straight ahead. That's the only reason. We're not doing anything funny, I said. Twill held her breath for a long skeptical moment. I sighed and put one hand on my hips, trying to disregard how silly I must look dressed as a giant cat. Twill, this is me we're talking about. You know me by now. Would I willingly dress up as a cat for weird sex, and then let you see me? Twill frowned, then seemed to let go of the breath. No, you wouldn't. Right you are, totally not your style. Cool onesie, actually. It's kinda cute. She lit up with a big, unguarded smile at last, and my goodness, I had forgotten how beautiful Twill could be. I wasn't attracted to the werewolf on a personal level, but I hadn't seen her in several weeks. Absence can have quite the effect with a girl as good-looking as Twill. Her dark curls fell over the collar of her clashing blue and lime green coat, and she'd picked up a new hoodie somewhere, a deep cream color that went well with her angelic features and sharp amber eyes. Twill's unintentional illusion of delicate femininity had been shattered long ago for me, or perhaps accentuated, in some obscure way, by seeing her turn into a whirling ball of tooth and claw, break most of her own bones, and pull zombies apart. I was always quite relieved the werewolf was on our side. Cute as hell, isn't it? Raine added with a smirk. I like the little ears on the hood. She snuck past my guard to flip the hood back up, messing up my hair, before darting away beyond range of my swatting hands. Raine! I flustered and yanked the hood off my head. Stop it. She shot me a wink, sat down, and gestured for Twill to make herself at home. Twill pulled out a chair, then remembered something and dug around inside her coat. She presented me with a garish little glittery gift bag, only slightly squashed. "'Cause it's your birthday," she said. Or, it was. Yesterday, right? Friday, Raine corrected her gently. Oh, you shouldn't have, Twill. I accepted the bag with a gentle frown. I really mean that, you shouldn't have. There's little I want for. She shrugged. We're mates, aren't we? Happy late birthday. We are friends, yes. I beamed at her. Thank you, Twill. You're sweet. I swear I saw her blush as she sat down. Twill had bought me a bright pink and white scarf, the nice thick-ribbed kind of scarf good for securing over one's mouth and nose on the coldest days of midwinter. A little flashy, too much color for the Heather of 6 months ago, but I had much more courage in self-expression than any past version of myself. I shall wear it to campus, tomorrow, I said. Raine had pulled out all the stops on my birthday, 2 days ago. She'd made me breakfast in bed and baked me a cake when we'd gotten back from lectures, a thick slab of chocolate and cream that tasted of bliss and clogged arteries, introduced with a rousing if mortifying round of "Happy Birthday to You," which even Evelyn had joined in with, though quietly, and all washed down with full-fat milk. When Evelyn had given me the cat onesie, I'd blushed like a beetroot. I'd completely forgotten about the bet we'd made in the heat of the moment, on that afternoon when Twill's mother had turned up at the house. Events since then had rather overtaken my attention, but Evelyn hadn't forgotten, and the loser's punishment was still very much on the cards. I loved it regardless. She knew I was having trouble with my body heat, always feeling the cold, and we set the cat onesie to work right away, after a bit of token resistance and awkward embarrassment. It was so very warm. Raine bought me 2 thick jumpers, a pair of fancy reusable gel hand warmers, a box of chocolates, a video game one I'd apparently like, but had never heard of before, the cover and illustration of an attractive witch leering over her bubbling cauldron, and an item of clothing that I will absolutely not relate to anyone else, ever, as long as I live. I'd return those kindnesses when the time came, because it mattered. Evelyn's birthday wasn't until spring, and Raine was a summer child. I hadn't had a birthday so nice since I was little, but not because of the pampering and the presents, not even because of being surrounded by my friends. For the first time in 10 years, it wasn't my birthday alone. Outside, somewhere, Maisie was turning 20 as well. "Where's Say at, then?" Twill asked, blowing on her mug of tea. I was playing around with the scarf, trying it out underneath the fluffy collar of the onesie, but my attention perked up at her question. Twill nodded at Preem. "She's never too far away, right? I think she's in her workshop at the moment, but she could do with some light exercise." "You should go say hi, Twill," I said, trying to sound as innocent as I could. Twill eyed the door to the ex-drawing room, exactly like a wary hound. "What, in there, with the giant invisible creepy crawlies and the portal to the fog dimension?" "That's been closed for weeks. Go say hi," I said. Twill frowned at me like I was bonkers. "She'll appreciate the polite gesture. You are in her house, after all." "Good save, yes." "Go on, Twill," I willed, "she wants to see you." "Heather?" Raine said my name, a curious quirk to her eyebrows. I made eyes at her when Twill glanced at the door again. "Don't spoil my matchmaking attempts." "She must be able to hear us out here," Twill said, "she just doesn't want to say hi." "It's cool, I don't want to rile her up or anything." "You won't." "Twill, go and knock on the door." "Really?" I nodded and smiled. Nod and smile. Twill narrowed her eyes at me. Oh damn, she smelled a rat. Did werewolves possess a heightened sense for danger? If so, hers was misfiring. I smiled wider. "You've set up some kind of prank, haven't you?" Twill asked slowly. She turned to Raine to check her expression. "I'm gonna knock on that door and a ruddy great praying mantis is gonna fall on my head." Raine laughed and raised her hands. "I'm none the wiser here. I dunno what Heather's playing at." "I'm not playing at anything. I'm just saying it doesn't hurt to be polite and say hello. I'm sure Evie would love to see you." The door to the workshop cracked open. Out peered a very unimpressed Evelyn. "The only prank here is she snapped, but her sharp tongue trailed off, staring at Twill. She swallowed. "My face?" Twill completed the insult, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, hey to you too, Evelyn. Told you she could hear us out here. Good morning, Evie." I beamed at her. "Look who's turned up. It's Twill." I felt like leaping up out of my seat and clapping my hands together, but I restrained myself. Raine raised her mug in greeting. "I do have eyes, yes." Evelyn shot me a withering look, stomped into the kitchen, and glanced around the mugs on the table. "You want a cuppa?" Raine asked. "Didn't want to interrupt you. Kettle's still warm." Evelyn grunted, and stared at Twill again. The werewolf shrugged. "What?" "It's nothing," Evelyn hissed, and turned away, as if trying to remember what she'd stepped in here to do. I tried to catch her eye. Yes, Evelyn snapped. "We're cool, we're fine, nothing is wrong." Twill spread her hands and looked at me for help. What did I do now? "You can call her Evie, you know," I said, forcing myself to pretend I was none the wiser. Friends can use pet names for each other. Surnames are a little too formal, a little too distant, don't you think? "Idiot mongrel," Evelyn muttered. "Hey. Come on, Evelyn, Evie." Twill attempted, looking at me out of the corner of her eye for approval. I gave her a covert thumbs up. "You like me really, we're friends now, aren't we? We were getting on great. That was you sending me messages from your phone last night, right? You're not like." "Just drink your bloody tea," Evelyn said, and thumped over to the fridge. She opened it and rummaged around, loudly. I felt like squealing. Messages? What was going on? "Oh, Evelyn, well done. Drink your tea," Preem echoed. Raine blinked theatrically several times. "I can't believe I'm witnessing this. Heather, quick, pinch my arm, I think I'm dreaming." Witnessing what? Did you all go off your rockers down in Sussex? Twill looked so lost, I felt sorry for her, but they had to do this on their own. I bit my lips together and silently swore I'd only step in if a genuine misunderstanding unfolded, or one of them was at risk of getting hurt. Of course, that didn't mean I couldn't talk to Twill in private later, plant an idea or two in her head, perhaps. I caught Raine's eye and somehow managed to communicate my intention, because she clacked her mug down, cracked her knuckles, and leaned forward to change the subject. You turned up right on time, by the way, she said to Twill. I was about to give you a ring, ask a favor. Twill tore her eyes off Evelyn's back, still frowning and confused. She blinked at Raine for a second, putting her thoughts back in order. Yeah. What's up? How'd you fancy a spot of B.E.? B&E? I echoed softly. Raine pulled a half-smile, half-wince. Breaking and entering, right? Twill supplied before Raine could answer, and started to grin. What's going down? We gotta smash someplace up. What have you lot got into this time? Yes, Raine, what's going on? I said, my voice somewhat sharper than I'd intended. Raine raised both hands in stalling surrender. Nothing. Yet. Probably. Yet. I gave her a bit of a look. Undoubtedly weak, dressed as I was in a fluffy cat onesie. Raine tilted her head to me. I haven't been keeping anything back from you, cross my heart and hope to die. Suddenly this morning I got wind of this. Twill leaned back slightly in her chair, as if she sensed invisible tension in the space between me and Raine. Evelyn peered at us as she shut the fridge. I cleared my throat and blushed slightly. I didn't mean to imply or mean that you were. It's okay, Heather, I know, Raine said softly, then took a deep breath. Long story short, do you remember our wayward friend, Little Miss Poundland Necromancer? Oh, her, yeah, Twill said. The one you put the wind up, right? That got my attention. I recalled her all too well, the prisoner we dragged out of the Sherrowford cult's pocket dimension, a mousy, scrawny young woman who I'd been determined to let live. I remembered her face, terrified of us, and the way she'd looked at me with fear and awe. Her name's Kimberly, I said. If I recall correctly. Why? Kimberly Kemp, Raine said. Got her full name out of her, and a bunch more stuff besides. Cute name, Twill added. Evelyn snorted in derision. Anyway, Raine continued. I've been checking up on her, a couple of times. Once before we left over Christmas, then once the day after we got back to town. You mean you've been intimidating the poor woman, I said. Raine, she was terrified of you the most. That's so cruel. Bloody right, damn, Twill said. Psycho. Raine laughed it off, and I almost bristled at her. She pulled a what could I do type of shrug. Nothing, nothing. I think. Hey, I made it clear as day I wasn't going to hurt her. Like Evie said, it had to be done, we had to be sure she wasn't gonna get picked up by the cult again. Oh, I suppose so, yes, from that angle. I dialed down. Fair enough. Helps that you got to play knight errant, I'll bet, Evelyn muttered. Duty of care and all that, Raine admitted with a tilt of her chin. Anyway, so, I called her, went round her little flat over on Wingate and Headley, she's in one of the towers and I didn't threaten her, I swear. I was there 5 minutes, no more. Asked her how she was, if any of her old comrades had been in contact, told her to come to us if she had any problems like that. Huh, Evelyn grunted. I'll bet you did. Evelyn, I almost snapped at her. Raine was a lot of things, but unfaithful she was not. Evelyn grimaced a silent apology and waved Raine on. Second time, I dropped by uninvited the day after we got back from down south. All was well. She was a bit surprised, and yeah, okay, probably shit scared of me, but it had to be done. Then I tried a third time, last Friday. And I couldn't. Raine paused, let that hang. What happened to her? I said. She could be doing anything, Evelyn hissed. What if she just left? I asked, but my voice felt weak. A sinking feeling dragged at the pit of my stomach. Raine raised 2 fingers. Hold up, this isn't the end of it. This morning, while Heather was having a lie-in, I got the bright idea to go round her workplace, the Poundland on Castle Street. They open early on a Sunday, for some dumb reason. I pretended to be her friend, turned the charm on Max for the girl behind the till. Turns out Kimberly called in sick last Friday, and then not a peep. Nobody's heard from her since. Last Friday a week and 2 days ago. The same day I'd been busy slipping outside. The sinking feeling settled as a ball of lead in my gut. A coincidence? It was on Raine and Evelyn's faces, but nobody voiced it. How could that be a coincidence? What were the odds? Oh, I bit my lip. That's bad, isn't it? Raine nodded. Could be. Could be she just did a runner, shacked up with a guy somewhere, or she's dead in a ditch. But that flat's still occupied, I've checked. Curtains drawn, front door locked. Don't know who's in there, if anybody, but they're not answering the door. It's our fault. It must be. It's the cult again. Or perhaps she's just terrified of us. I shook my head, groping for any reason, anything that wasn't connected to me. It, Twill said. Could be anything though. Raine nodded. Either way, our Poundland necromancer's gone missing. You and I, Twill, we're gonna break into her flat.